Primal Response Group, Jesse and Wayne, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, brother. Honored.
Yeah, I am too. You guys came up for me right at the beginning of my journey. I had been sort of introduced to you like through social media, because that was kind of where my journey started. Like, who are the guys? Who are the dudes doing training out there? There was some shotgun stuff in there back then, and I want to talk about that today, because I don't see a lot of shotgun stuff happening. But that was one of the things that I picked up. But the other thing was I was looking for California guys. Yeah. And you guys are California dudes. You guys are from, you guys work at an agency in Southern California. So for the audience that may not know who you are, you guys are going to introduce or talk about yourselves here in a minute. But cops, right, in law enforcement, been doing that for quite some time. You're teaching other cops as well as civilians to in the world of firearms instruction. And there's some special things that I think you guys are doing that we can kind of talk about there. And you guys have an interesting perspective. But my thing is like, as close as you guys are, I think we've crossed paths even a couple of times, maybe at a range event or two.
Yeah. I want to say I first met you at California Range Weekend, the first one that it came up, right?
The very first one. Yeah, it was the very first one. And from then I was like, I would love to take a class from, with or from you guys, and it just hadn't happened yet. So anyway, I'll take you however I can freaking get you. And you guys, came through San Jose on a way. You're on a trip right now to, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, so we're heading over to Turlock, running one of our courses out there for a few of the agencies. So it's a quick turnaround trip, 2 days, and we'll be heading back home.
Back to SoCal.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you guys taking time out of your day and your trip to come see me and spend time with me. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, likewise.
So let's jump right into it. And we got it's a, this 2-on-1 situation here. So I'm going to start with, who wants to talk about Primal and what you guys are doing? I mean, it can go back and forth, obviously, but who wants to tell the story? Like, who are you guys? Where are you coming from? Like, how did this start? All that kind of stuff.
So we kind of started Primal back in about 2019. We were on our range staff down at our agency teaching guys, and it's a collateral duty for us down at our department. So, kind of how it was going back then was there wasn't a whole lot of time allotted for us to teach, right? So we saw how our officers were coming through and qualing, and that's pretty much the only time that we were allotted was to allow them to qualify, right? So there wasn't a lot of teaching going on.
Was this like an adjunct duty, or was this an actual, like, you are the firearms instructor full-time deal?
So it's a collateral duty. So you have your primary duty, and then on the side we go qual our guys. But it was inside our agency.
Gotcha.
We have a range staff, right? So we weren't getting to do a lot of teaching, which is what we wanted to do. And Wayne and I were going to a lot of classes with a lot of really good instructors that we looked up to, that we were learning a lot from. So we're like, man, we want to teach more, So we decided to make Primal, try to kind of spread the word and get the information out there, try to make some shooters a little bit better if we can. So
that's awesome. Let's pause here for a second. So what you had was, you had duties where you weren't able to deliver the things that you really felt like you needed and wanted to deliver. And you saw an opportunity to maybe start a company where you could do that, maybe bring in maybe some of the local folks that you were trying to help anyways. And then obviously this thing has evolved.
Yeah. And I don't want to sound like I'm, bashing, saying that we want time.
I'm not hearing that at all.
Now how it is at our agencies, we're given a lot of time now to teach our guys, which is great. It's shifted, right? So we're getting quarterly trainings, 10 hours a quarter.
Awesome.
That everyone's going through, which is awesome, right? But it's kind of been that way throughout law enforcement for a long time, where it's just go qual, right? So the range guys at all these different agencies turn into facilitators of a qualification, right? And a qualification is not training, right? A qualification is that department's standard that you have to pass in order to carry a gun for that department, right? Or a post standard, but it's not training. Like, no one's getting taught anything. So like in our classes, we talk about it a lot, like not being facilitators, right? Don't just be a facilitator of a qualification. We're instructors. We're trying to better our officers. So being instructors, not facilitators. And it's actually funny because we talk about that all the time. And I was sitting back, kind of the way that Wayne and I teach is we try not to step on each other's toes, So one of us will be in front of the line talking, the other one will be behind unless we got something to say. But I'm standing back there watching Wayne and heard him say, "Hey, we're be instructors, not facilitators," right? And I'm like, man, we got to coin that term. So now, like, that's on our bio, and we made some stickers. So at the end of our instructor classes, like everyone gets a little sticker with our little instructors, not facilitators.
I can totally relate to that, man. I mean, I talk about this. The terms I use are the difference between, for me, and I think we're saying the same thing, but if we're not, tell me.
Mm-hmm.
I look at it as like being coaches versus instructors, maybe in the space that I'm in. And I look at it as an instructor as that person that stands up. Sorry, and let me relate this to like the fitness business, which I'm obviously very familiar with. That's my wheelhouse, but I've spent a lot of time around firearms instruction. And so to me, a lot of it is very parallels itself. But the point of this being, like, the instructor is the person that sits up in front on the Peloton bike with the headset on and is taking somebody through a checklist of items for the day. In this case, it's a workout, like,
Right.
And probably playing the DJ thing a little bit too, which means I got to push this button at this time to make this thing happen. There really isn't any like coaching going on. Like, how could you be doing this better? What are the things that you may be missing here? Things to look out for. And a lot of times the way that instruction has been set up for whoever is having to do the instruction or the facilitating doesn't leave a lot of time for that, right? Because there's all these items in the tick list you have to hit. And I've been to a lot of courses, both on the firearms and then like even on the fitness side of things, whether that's continuing education or whatever else. The ones that I enjoyed and got the most from were the ones that had the facilitator or the instructors, right? In your case, in the example you're using, or the coaches in mind, that really knew how to read the room and understand what the person that was standing in front of them, say in your case, the line, needed to take away. And sometimes that can be a very small part of the bigger whole that completely changes the game for them going forward. And so going back to like you get 10.5 hours. If that 10.5 hours is spent with the facilitator and not with a really good instructor, what are you really getting out of that? And to your point, I think this is for people listening, there's obviously a lot of this audience understands very much what you're talking about from a cultural perspective and that what happens in qualification in law enforcement. But I think it's also important for the people that maybe don't really understand that it is very limited. And that qualification tends to be a very low bar to have to meet. And so for guys like you, and with the way this thing's already got kicked off, I bet that was probably very frustrating to look at and watch.
Yeah, absolutely it was. And it wasn't even just in-house. This was across the board, post courses, through other agencies, other third-party instructors. There was kind of just this constant set standard. And it wasn't high. It was the teach to the lowest common denominator, and there is nothing that drives me crazier than that philosophy behind instructing. Because the reality is, if you're teaching to the lowest common denominator, one person might improve, but you're failing absolutely everybody else there, right? And then so how do they build on that? You brought up in the fitness aspect, and I'm sitting here kind of thinking about it going, if you just put someone through a workout and you don't really instruct them, you don't help them through this, they're not going to be in shape at the end. They're not going to be fit. Their goals they haven't achieved. What you're looking for is to show them how to do these things. Hey, this is the proper form. This is heart rate zones, this, whatever it is, right? And then it's incumbent upon them to take that information on their own to their garage workout, to the gym they normally go to, and build upon that foundation that you set for them. And so I looked at this in law enforcement as the same way of going, hey, don't come to our course and expect to leave a better shooter. It generally doesn't happen. And when I go to courses, I don't have an expectation of, hey, all my problems are going to be fixed. Right. And that's not the goal, of course. And now sometimes it does happen. Sometimes there's an anomaly and someone leaves just an exponentially better shooter, which is great. But that shouldn't really be what you're going in there looking. What you should be going into the course looking for is, hey, what are the drills? What are the teaching points? How do I execute what I need to do? How do I set a proper program for this? And then months and months and thousands of, rounds on range later, that's where you start to see individual growth. So we took this instructor level going, hey, we do a lot of instructor level courses because if we just do the operator ones, okay, cool. I teach you how to be a better shooter, and you leave with that information, or maybe you teach a couple of your buddies. But on the instructor level side, and this is why we do instructor courses, is I feel like our reach is much greater, right? So if we have a group of instructors coming to the department, well, then they can take the information that we gave them and disseminate that amongst their officers. Therefore, our reach went from, one instructor here. Well, now he's teaching his agency of 100 people kind of what we gave to him. And so that's why I think it's very important to really have a, I almost want to say intimate
like connections,
right? Take it very seriously, go down the line and recognize exactly what your skills are, who you are, what you need to work on, instead of just being set back behind the line and
we got to get through this today.
Right. Mm-hmm. And just treating everyone as equal because not everyone is,
Yeah. And just to be clear, we're not intimate like that with our students. I mean, unless they,
I don't know.
Not all
unless they pay extra.
We're not afraid.
Depends how long I've been traveling for.
I think I can totally relate to this. I think a lot of people probably listening to the show obviously can very much relate to this. And this is becoming more of a common message that's getting out there, which is really great. And that is, we have to do better. How do we do better? And you guys are young guys in the sense of, you guys basically are breaking we've always done it this way, so we're going to continue to do it this way type of mentality or attitude. So I wonder, let's just pause for a second on kind of what you guys are doing from Primal Response and go back to kind of where you came from as officers and how it kind of led up to this. Like, how do you get it? Usually, so part of this is the question and part of this is like my assumptions now. Anytime I come across like the current level firearms instructor for a department, what I generally find is this person is a go-getter. This person is a help giver. This person is trying to do better for the department and for the people there because they recognize there's a need. They want it to be better. They're not looking to necessarily stand up on a platform and, like I said, on the Peloton bike at the front of the room with the bright lights and loud music and makeup and jog bras and shit with the headset on. That's not who they are. They're generally a person that's like, hey, we can do better here. I love doing this. I love helping people. I also love my job, whatever that happens to be. Some departments are big enough where this is a full-time gig. But they've also done a lot of things within their departments. Generally, they've worked on a lot of different teams, task force. They were on the street for a long time. Often different agencies, not all the time, but often they've been with different agencies to understand where the gaps are and kind of where they can contribute. And then they're just fired up to do it. They learn a lot of lessons along the way in trying to, they have big ideas and they like to be help givers and not everybody likes to support those people. So I'm just wondering about your story and kind of, how that evolved for you guys. Has it always been together? Have you guys always been working together or side by side, or did this just like moon, sun, and stars? What happened?
When I started, first kind of going back to how I started in law enforcement, right? I put myself through the academy as a self-sponsored recruit back in like 2010. Nobody was hiring at the time.
Okay.
Right? Nobody was hiring. I was 20 years old. And I was like, I knew I wanted to do this.
You want to be a cop?
Yeah. So I put myself through the academy, worked for an Indian reservation, law enforcement, while still all these other agencies were like laying people off, right? 2013 came along. I got hired on with a sheriff's department down there in Southern California. Worked the jails. That's where I met Wayne. At first, I didn't like him. I'm going to be honest. I told him straight up too. I was like, this guy's a jerk. But then we became friends.
Cece said that about me too.
Yeah. So then we kind of hit it off. Shortly thereafter, I did a couple years in the jails, and then went to the PD that we're at now. Wayne and I kind of decided like, hey, let's go over here. So we kind of both went around the same time. I worked patrol for about 2.5 years, went to one of our, we call it the COPS unit, community policing. There's other agencies call it something different, right? Like neighborhood policing or POP, problem-oriented policing, whatever it is. So did that for about 3 years. Went back to patrol, did the FTO thing for a little while, and now I'm in investigations.
Got you. Okay. So 2010 is when the journey starts.
That's when it started, yeah.
Right. That's 14 years ago. Well, almost. I don't know. I mean, we're at the beginning. When we're recording this, we're right at the beginning of 24.
Yeah, it was the beginning January.
Yeah. What were, I guess as we're just going through this, just in specific to learning firearms, learning shooting, I want to get into the tactics stuff too much. I mean, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Everybody does those things a little bit differently.
Right.
But what was your experience like?
So to be honest, I didn't have a whole lot of experience with firearms coming into law enforcement.
Okay,
right?
That's pretty common.
Yeah, and like I loved it in the academy. That was obviously my favorite part of the academy, just getting out and shooting and stuff. So that kind of started to drive my passion into firearms training. And it's funny because I look back now and I think of like all the instructors and like the tips that they gave me and stuff, and I'm just like, it's like that same. And nothing to knock them, like they were great people, right? But it was just that same like regurgitated information that really there was no idea of how it worked. It was just kind of like, hey, I heard this, so I'm going to repeat it again,
Where was this coming from? This was coming from like interagency instruction?
Correct.
Were you at the time seeking outside instruction?
Not yet.
Okay, gotcha.
Not yet. No. So,
but you had a sense. Now looking back.
And I just kind of took it at face value. I'm like, okay, cool. Got it. Right. But then I started kind of exploring myself and going like, that doesn't really make sense. Right. Just like certain little things. After going to the PD that we're at now, a couple years in, I knew I wanted to be on our range staff, and I started like seeking some outside training. And that's kind of how that evolved. So just training with as many dudes as I could.
Your time, your dime. How did you go about? So this is an interesting question. You're in law enforcement and you're looking for these outside dudes. How were you finding them?
So one great thing about the dude that was running our range before, he was, because we have a range for our department.
Okay.
Right? So we have our own range.
You're not sharing it with anybody?
We're not sharing it. I mean, they rent it out, but to other like agencies and stuff, but it's our range. So what was great is that he was allowing other dudes to come, like high level instructors that he was hosting to come out and teach. So then we were jumping in the class.
Smart.
And, they were offering the class to like any of our department guys. And it ended up that Wayne and I were taking all of them.
Yeah.
So it worked out.
That is great. So that is not super common tale.
It's not common.
At all. Going back to the dudes just teaching the same things the dudes before them taught them, were taught before them, and so forth. All right. So that's a little bit of the journey and the evolution of kind of where you are now. So going into trying to become part of the range staff, how is that being received? Were you looked at, because maybe there's a couple ways to look at that, where you looked at like, hey, this is a guy that's really trying hard. He's really working hard. He's going outside. He's doing all these other things. And this is a dude that we could get a lot of value from. Now, this is just a young guy. He's only been on the department a few years. Like, he hasn't earned his stripes yet. He's not doing, we're not putting him there kind of thing. Or was it maybe even a little bit worse than that, where it's like, no, we don't need this. This dude's like a cowboy and he's out there he's going to try and change everything. Does it fall into any of those categories?
I think it probably falls into all of those categories.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I think for the most part, they saw, hey, this guy's coming up to the range all the time. He's taking all these classes that nobody else is jumping on, and for both of us, right? Because both Wayne and I are jumping on both of these, on all these classes. So I think it was a little bit of that, but then also like we're going, hey, what about this? Hey,
that's
this
challenging ideas,
right? Mm-hmm. And then we're getting a little bit of pushback. So a little bit more open mindset now. People kind of coming around, but at the time, I think it was kind of a little bit of everything. We came on range staff probably 2.5 to 3 years on the department, so pretty early. But like we're both super motivated, and we're getting out there and training with a lot of people, and trying to learn. So we came on, we were by far the youngest guys on the staff at the time. Now we're
still the youngest.
We're still fairly young, but two of the more senior guys on the staff.
So I have questions around. So just kind of switching over to Wayne real quick. So you guys are sort of pursuing this together, right? Like, and so you have one another to bounce ideas off of or commiserate with when you're getting pushback, or maybe even strategize on like, how do we have this conversation different with these guys,
right?
To get what we want out of it. I wonder what the most challenging part was, in terms of moving into the position, and then maybe the transition into the position to maybe starting to change culture a little bit. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it was finding that fine line between, hey, we have all these ideas. We feel like these are good additions to our program. we want to change all of these things. And then, we started getting the pushback on them all. And then the real challenging part was, okay, we're not going to be able to fight every fight. We got to pick our battles. And so we would go, okay, we got to give you a win too. And I think it is important. It's important to stay, keep yourself grounded, stay humble. Hey, other people have good ideas. A lot of other experiences that they can pull from to say, hey, this is why I support this idea. But then you kind of run into this, okay, well, give me an example of how that is practical to what we do, right? And then occasionally what you would hear is kind of a made up story about something, or
isn't that interesting?
And this isn't even just within our agency. This is when we're teaching too, and we're having conversations with other instructors who sometimes want to challenge something.
It's like lore, or just like the story, the age old story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or I had a buddy who told me this or something, and he was involved in this. And so it's this fine line of, hey, I want to get my point across, but I can't shit on everything that they want to talk about and they want to do, even though I may disagree with it. Part of it is, okay, I got to have a little slice of humble pie here, and okay, whatever. We can teach that. But we should incorporate then this over here. So that way everyone kind of feels like they have a say. In law enforcement, everyone is big, tough, type A people, but everyone gets their feelings hurt very easily.
Sure.
And, there's a lot of ego massaging that you kind of have to do to make everyone feel important and included. And so, in these courses, another instructor says, oh, but I like it this way. It's like, okay, man, that's cool. That works good for you. And, sometimes you just have to end it with, well, hey, man, you know what? I'm not going to be at your gunfight. You're not going to be at my gunfight. You do what you think you need to do. And so that, I would say, is probably the most difficult part, is honestly just biting your tongue on certain things and going, this isn't my fight.
I see that culturally as being a huge issue, right? Because you're trying to make change, and I don't think this is about who's right and who's wrong.
Right.
It's about the open-minded piece, and at least being open enough to explore things and ask the question, maybe this guy is very right about this. Let's go down this path and let's find the best solution to this answer. But it invariably comes back to feelings and ego in the end, and people beating one another up, or just being so closed down to where they're never going to get their idea across anyway, because they haven't created space in order for that to even happen.
Right.
Because they've just it's a constant battle. It's a black or white, or yes or no, or right or wrong. And I do believe when you start to look at this stuff, there's going to be some rights and some wrongs and some blacks and some whites. But understanding where that is which I think you were alluding to, is like understanding how to have these conversations, reading the room, like, okay, what's the real battle here?
Right.
And what do I really need to get accomplished here? And where do I have to give a little bit in order to get what I need or what I know I want out of this? Right. Those are skills, right? Those are not something you just walk in with. So yeah, I see you over there, because I have further questions about this.
Yeah.
Go ahead and add what you're going to add, because I think you're probably going to answer my next question.
So I was just going to say, like, Wayne and I, we try to stay open-minded. Every time we teach a class, if that's like internally or for Primal or whatever it is, we try to stay open-minded. We check our egos at the door. And we always tell everybody, like, there's multiple ways of doing things, right? And for the most part, the majority of the time, we don't say, like, you have to do it this way, right? Which is how it's been for a long time in law enforcement, is this is how you do it. You have to do it this way, because in your gunfight, this is how it's going to happen. And just like Wayne said, like, we're not going to be there for your gunfight. You're not going to be there for ours. And the gunfight's going to dictate what's going to happen, right? So we're not going like, hey, every time you draw the gun, take it arbitrarily step to the left, right? Which is like still something at some academies is being taught, right? And it's like, well, we do, and kind of going off track here a little bit, I was saying before, we're doing a lot of, we do quarterly training now, right?
Okay.
10-hour days.
That's in your department.
In our department.
Yeah,
And
gotcha.
when we do that, oftentimes we're doing simunition force-on-force stuff. We started seeing guys who were taught that in the academy, arbitrarily taking a step to the left or right, whatever it is, now going up to do a hot stop, bad guy jumps out, starts shooting some sims at him. They're taking a step out from outside of cover because they're so used to this, like, draw the gun step at the same time type of deal, right?
Yeah, that's how it works, man.
Right. So
you just downloaded that onto the motherboard. That's
100%.
That's it. That's life now. Yeah.
And so we're not like hard set on most things, right? We're pretty open-minded about like, hey, if you got something and it's a good way of doing it, let's talk about it. You know, there's 1,000 ways to do certain things. There are some few things though that we put our foot down. We're like, there's no way I'm teaching that.
Okay,
you know what I mean?
so I do know what you mean, and I want to talk about that because I think those are going back to the black and white and the right or wrong. And I want to say, most like when I listen to, talk with, whether it's on air, off air, watch people, you know, talk about it, whether they're doing it on a podcast or on YouTube or on social media somewhere, or even if I'm just being a fly on the wall in a conversation that I might have the opportunity. I was just a SHOT Show. It was a fly on the wall for a lot of conversations. It was awesome because I'm just sitting there listening, watching the kind of the back and forth. Here's my point. I think, again, going back like the fitness thing, the experts tend to agree. When I say the experts, I don't mean the 50-year veteran instructor that's just, or facilitator that's just been doing the same thing over and over and over again. I mean the people in the field that have been doing the teaching, that have been out there doing training, that have maybe entered in some competitions, that have done the job, that have talked with all the other people or a lot of other people that are doing all that. They tend to agree on most of the stuff. It's unfortunately, there's a few things that I think people get their heads just completely sucked into, and they can't ever agree on any of it. And I think sometimes it's just like misdirected energy sometimes, or maybe even a misunderstanding, or just taking something and creating like totally fabricating something around something maybe somebody said or somebody
to
did.
support their
to
argument.
Whatever, right? But let's go back to that. Let's go back to the, like, there's some things we just will not do. Tell me what those are.
I'll bring up the one that gets a lot of traction already is the implementation of competition shooting to our range training.
Let's talk about it.
You know, we are adamant that competition shooting will absolutely help you in the world of law enforcement and OISs for sure. Shooting period. Okay. But you still have this group of people who will argue that because competition shooting's not real life or any of that stuff. And we're not advocating, hey, every weekend go out and shoot a competition. Every weekend go out and shoot a competition. What we will say is, what about once every few months? Once every 6 months? Just get a benchmark what can you just occasionally show up and do one? You know, the argument is, well, it's not real life and this and that. And it's like, you know what, man, if you cannot differentiate a shooting stage from real life tactics, CQB, ever evolving environment, I can't help you. I can't help you, you know, and not to sound egotistical. It's just, we're not at the same page in our training, you know?
Totally get it.
And so, you know, shooting is shooting, you know, speed and accuracy. You need both those things. And competition shooters are the best in the world at shooting. And that's what we teach is shooting. So we will get pushback because we bring quite a bit of competition stuff into our classes. Hey, a competition shooter stands this way for this reason, or does this or this, you know, or we picked up this drill from a competition guy. And occasionally you kind of see the dude's wearing cries and his whatever with his big old buck knife sitting on his gun belt for some reason, and his rappel gloves hanging off that he's never rappelled from, and so they have that pushback. But then every single time when it comes down to, okay, put your money where your mouth is, those generally are the lesser performing guys who are so closed-minded to do something like that, you know? And so that's like one of those things that's we're big on. We're big on, hey, again, shoot competitions. Not every weekend, just occasionally. Challenge yourself.
There's skills to be gained and things to be realized, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, as much as you can. I mean, I learn a lot for every competition that I go shoot. You know, you go shoot and you squat up with dudes that are better than you, and you're going to learn.
It's awesome,
right? It's like going to a class,
which is why you
get to learn stuff.
I mean, I like to be competitive, but I go out there just as it's a training opportunity,
right?
You know, if I can,
and the more you can do it, great. I mean, when you're running a business and you got a full-time job and kids and everything else, it's hard to get to them every weekend. But you know, as much as you can get to them. But like Wayne said, you know, it can't be this closed-minded, like, oh, that stuff's going to get you killed in the streets, right? Like, and that's been like the common phrase forever, right? It's like same thing with, you know, certain martial arts, right? Jiu-jitsu. If you do sports jiu-jitsu, you're going to be able to outperform somebody who does not, right? But I would never sit down and butt scoot somebody in a street fight, right? It's just that wouldn't happen, but that's sports stuff, right? So you have to be able to go, okay, what can I take from this and incorporate it into this, right? What can I take from the competition world that these high level dudes, like the top shooters in the world, are doing to make themselves faster, more efficient, more accurate, and then incorporate that into real life?
This is so important. I was just having this conversation around shooting and around like human performance, working out. And God, it's just really wild. I mean, the imagination that people have in trying to create a scenario for everything. Like I have to create a scenario around my workouts because I don't know, yes, maybe you know this guy, his name's Felix. He's over in Europe. He's Redbeard Tactical is his name on Instagram. Very interesting dude. I had some time with him at a SHOT Show actually, but been going back and forth about this, about every like your workouts, and this goes the same for shooting and competition shooting. It doesn't have to be a real life scenario. Just fucking work out, right? Just go shoot, as you're saying. And if you can do that in a competition, some type of a competition, steel match, PRS, USPSA, IDPA, whatever it is, it's going to give you something different than doing the other thing. I mean, USPSA is going to be different than steel match. There's things to be taken away from, but not everything needs to be compared to, well, if this was real life, it is fucking real life.
Right.
There's a gun, there's real bullets in that gun, and there's targets downrange, and you were trying to hit those generally on a clock for accuracy, for whatever it is. That's as much real life as it needs to be, because after that, all of that translates into whatever the next thing is. Really frustrating for me to watch that, and it just blows my mind. Like, so I hear what you're saying with the frustration there, and I get it, man. Go compete when you can, and try. But also, we have life, we have work, we have all these other things we need to do. We need to be working out. We need to be eating. We need to be sleeping. We need to be balanced and all those other things. So like, don't go to the competition and put all this imagination into it. Just go do the thing.
And I think dudes get scared because they maybe have shot one. And now that's why they fall back to this. Like, it's not real because they got smoked, right? So one thing in law enforcement is like, a lot of people in law enforcement think because they carry a gun for a living that they're great with that. Like they're more proficient with that than anybody else, right? Because they carry it for a living. That doesn't mean anything, man. Like you go to these competitions and you see, cop shooting, first time competition. You throw any cop into a first time competition, they're going to get smoked.
I can just dropping a couple of names here, and I try not to do that too often, but I was having another conversation with a guy. His name's James Gearing, and he's got the Behind the Shield podcast, very wildly popular. He's been around for a long time. I think he does a really great job. He actually comes from, he's a firefighter by trade, but he spent a lot of time training. And he was sharing with me some realizations that he had, which speak directly to this. When he would go to these classes that were offered up, this one particular class had been offered up to the local, some of the local law enforcement agencies for free. It was a very large, we'll call it firearms training company that was there. And like there had been some scholarship spots, and whatever. And all the spots were full. It was sold out otherwise for the people that could actually pay to get in, but they were reserving these spots and nobody came out. Like they had 12 spots and only 3 guys showed up from law enforcement. They'd been put on the list somehow. They never showed up. And I said, yeah, it's pretty interesting. And this goes to what you were speaking about, because he brought this up. He's like, I can't imagine how terrifying it might be as a law enforcement officer to actually go out there and have to stand on the line and look at the guys to your left, or the guy to your left, to your right, and there may be a civilian, and they are just smoking you on a regular basis all day long. That in and of itself takes a lot of humility, right, to get past it and go like, okay, well, I actually suck at this. And so that goes back to the competition piece, like to go out there and find out how bad you actually really suck. Like you can look at that two different ways. You can look at it like, that's just my jumping off point to all the opportunity that's in front of me now to get better. Or I can look at that as like the end of my self-worth and, everything else. Like nobody can know this. Nobody can know how bad I suck. Yeah. So as long as I'm not testing myself, and as long as I'm walking around saying, I'm great with this gun that I carry on my hip every day or my belt every day or whatever else, with nothing to compare that against and nothing to show for it outside of whatever you're saying, that's a pretty easy platform to maintain until it fucking matters, I guess.
So, you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with. Right. When I started at the large SO agency, I'd go to the qual. I would get a perfect 100 on the qual. I got the little range expert marksman pin, whatever it was. If you do it 3 times, you get, or 3 perfect ones in a row, you get that pin, right? And so you get it and you think you are just that, like, cool, expert, However, the qual is what a qual is, and it's a huge Shrek-sized silhouette target. You got to almost try to miss at this point. And so I got it. So I thought I was good. And the very first outside class I ever attended, oddly enough, was Steve Fisher he just had on.
Yeah.
His was the first one.
I love Steve.
And so I show up and it was an open enrollment with civilians in there. Okay. And it was at our home range too. So already it was like, hey,
you're feeling comfortable.
I'm feeling comfortable.
Oh, pretty good.
People know that, okay, this is his home range. If they need something, go to him, know. And so I go, well, first they do the introduction and Steve goes, tell me something you want to learn. And I said, well, I want to, and this was, I don't know, 7-8 years ago, something like that. And I said, I want to learn how to be quicker with double taps. And Steve goes, yeah, bro, the 1960s call, they want their terminology back. Yeah, exactly. And I didn't know Steve at the time. I know Steve now, he's a buddy of mine now, but I didn't know him at the time. And so he just immediately just like shit on me in front of the whole fucking class. I'm like, oh, God. And so then we get out to the range and we start at like 25 yards. It's like, and I was carrying a Springfield XD chambered in 45 because America, but my last agency, if you didn't carry a 45, you were like a POS or something, like,
oh, so there's like
they would make fun of you.
Social pressure to carry a 45.
Yes. Why do you carry a 45? Well, because I don't make a 46, and so there absolutely was this by the range instructors. Hey, you're a man, you carry 45.
This is only 8 years ago.
Yes, this is not long ago at all.
Right.
And so I show up with this terrible gun, and I shoot, and I'm atrocious. But again, you're only as good as the people around you. And that class was a good shooting class. There were some skilled people there. And right then and there, I'm like, oh, I'm not this range expert marksman pin wearing guy that I thought I was. Mm-hmm. And now I realize, wow, that ceiling is way higher than I thought. And it takes a level of humility to be able to go there, suck ass in front of everybody and go, well, I guess I need to do this more. And then you go to the next class knowing you're still probably going to suck. But at that point, that's kind of how like my journey started is, hey man, I ate that slice of humble pie, embarrassed myself in front of everybody. It's good. It's fine. That's what you kind of have to do. But yes, that's kind of how mine started. And going to these open enrollment with civilians in there, it's funny is, when I go to these classes, generally speaking, I'm getting paid to be there. The ammo is free. I didn't pay for, the course enrollment if we're hosting, and I will out of pocket pay for other courses too.
Yeah.
But if it's like at our agency, we get free spots. And so then you're in there with civilians who had to take time off of work, had to pay the $600-700 course fee, had to pay $1,000 in ammo. And it's like, those are the dudes who are dedicated. Those are dudes I'm trying to keep up with who they have an absolute investment in this. They're passionate about it. Otherwise they wouldn't be here. Where oftentimes you have cops who they don't even want to be there, even though they're getting paid to be there. Right? They're being forced there.
I hear this a lot. Voluntold, as they say.
Yeah, voluntold. Or they're there just for a certificate, And so when I go to these guys, I love it when there's civilians there. It's like, cool. Those are the dudes I'm gonna shoot next to. Those are the dudes I'm gonna stack up against. And there's give and take with both.
Sure.
Sometimes there's cops there that are just lights out, and sometimes civilians that are serious safety issues. But yeah, so that's kind of how my shooting started. Was just that, is going to a course, just getting fucking murked, and then realizing, oh man, wow, I suck.
It's so funny. That's kind of like my fitness journey started that way. Like my real kind of like interest, but also my realization, I guess, like of what could get done and when you reframe something. So I think that's what I was alluding to before, is like, how do you walk away from that situation and respond, right? Like you're getting murked. for me, it was the presidential physical fitness testing. I've told the story a couple times, so people might be bored by it, but it was the pull-up day, and they lined us up. There was a boys' class, girls' class, and the pull-up bars were like right next to one another, and they just lined you up, and you got up there, and it's like hang from the bar and pull up. Fucking, I hadn't thought about it much. I don't know if we'd tested the year before. I don't remember. I don't remember. I just know when we got there and I grabbed on that bar, I couldn't fucking move. Like I was saying, and the girl next to me did like 3 pull-ups, and I was mortified in front of the whole class, full of boys and girls. Like I was like, holy shit! Like I can't. Like what happened there? And there was a pull-up bar like that summer. Like there was a pull-up. There was a park course or like, kind of physical fitness course put in the park across the street from where I grew up. And they put a pull-up bar right there. And I was like, just went out there every day, pulled up, tried to pull up. And by the end of that summer, I was doing pull-ups to the, chin-ups to the back of my neck. And by the time I got to my freshman year in high school, I was like, nobody's ever going to do more pull-ups than me. And that was just the response. So again, it started down the journey that I went on. But the point of that was I walked away from that going, I can either run with my tail between my legs and never speak about this moment ever again. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Not think about it and never approach that hard thing ever again. Or I can go out there and I can actually make an effort. And in this case, I didn't need a coach. Like I didn't need somebody to tell me to do this. There wasn't like, you don't need to go to a pull-up class. It's really just self-applying or applying what you learn. But there's something to be said about having that feeling in your gut, like, holy shit, I suck. Right? Because now you have someplace to move forward from. And I just see there's a massive fear of realizing that from a lot of the population that you work with about what their combative skills are actually like, what their physical fitness skills are like, what their shooting skill is like. And there seems to be a lot of overcompensation in a lot of other ways to kind of get around those things to advance their careers, stay out of trouble, stay out of the fight, shag calls. I don't know. You guys probably see a lot of that, but I hear about it. Mm-hmm. And it's frustrating for me. And I don't actually get that process. And this speaks to more of the term being a professional and, what you should be doing to maintain a level of professionalism as a law enforcement officer who does carry that gun. Yeah. Right. And among other things.
Yeah. And it is, not to make excuses for anybody, but I know that it is hard for that patrol officer that, is trying to juggle a ton of different things, not given a whole lot of time to go train on the range, right? So if we're doing, like our department, we do 2 days a month is like open range. So like the officers can come up and shoot, right? It's off duty, right? So they're not getting, there are some times that they allow them to come up like during their shift and shoot a little bit for an hour or whatever. But other than that, we're doing our quarterly training. And even during our quarterly training, it's half the days either DTAC or something else going on. And then the other half, we got range, but then they try to incorporate some scenarios. So that's like our time gets cut even more. So, in law enforcement, you have to be an expert in everything, right? And if you're not, and somebody screws up and does something wrong, and then the whole world sees it, right? So being an expert in every field is difficult. And that's why, I think some of that falls on us as a department or as agencies across the nation of not providing the time to train as much as, we would like to. Yep. Because there's a job that needs to be done. You know what I mean? We can't be like, can't have, like in our city, for example, we got, in the middle of the night, we got 7 cops working. You know what I mean? So like during the day, there's 11 cops working, the patrol, like shagging calls. So they're busy. You know what I mean? And it's like, we can't go, hey, give me 2 or 3 of those guys and we're going to go train every other week. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, we're not like the fire department where like there's 30 dudes sleeping at any given time.
Yeah, they have breaks. So, it's a different job, man.
Right. It's a different job. So, and I just like throwing a little.
I know you guys always.
I love throwing.
I've had firefighters on. They leave no stone unturned either.
We get along great with our fire guys too, and I have a bunch of really close friends that are firemen, so I just like throwing little dings. But yeah, so it's hard to put, solely put the blame on them for the lack of their training in firearms, tactics, whatever it is. DTAC stuff, whatever you want to throw out there, because also it's not everything is a fight. Not everything is a gunfight in law enforcement, right? Like you have to wear a ton of different hats. You're going to
if that's the only answer you have, you're in big trouble.
Right, right.
We're all in big trouble.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
and you know, because we'll see it on the range, and it can be frustrating going like, hey man, like you lose a fist fight, you get beat up. You lose a gunfight, you die. You know, and so it can be frustrating seeing people that don't really care or aren't super invested in it. But at the same time, you know, I also understand not everyone can be as passionate about it as we are. Not everyone can care as much as we are. You know, God forbid your money gets embezzled and I'm the one that's going to investigate it. You will never get your money back.
I hear where you're coming from.
That case will stay open for a long time.
Right.
I can't even spell embezzlement. All right. You know, so it's like we need those experts in these other fields. As much time as I spend practicing, you know, my range stuff, somebody has to practice their DTAC stuff. Somebody has to practice this white collar stuff, child pornography, gangs, dope. And so will law enforcement as a whole ever really become a shooting community? And will we ever see just these huge drastic change? You know, not to be a Debbie Downer, but there are things we can do to better ourselves, especially with, you know, technology and stuff. But are we ever really going to, as a community, become like a community as in law enforcement, become just these, everyone in law enforcement is a range person as a shooter? No, I don't think it's going to happen.
I think that's a really good point.
You know,
I think let's talk about this for a second, because you're right. And I guess I didn't really look at it this way. And I'm in a going back to like you surrounding yourself with people, you wind up having very similar conversations. I don't want to call it an echo chamber, but you're just in groups of conversations with people that are having very similar conversations. And this is one of them, actually. You're just making a really good point there that not everybody wants to be a really good shooter, right? Now, I think there's a level of skill, right, that should be required. And I think that's where that's when the real challenge comes in, is like, until the barrier of entry to this changes and it becomes a little tougher to do it, which would probably then, you can make the assumption that if the barrier to entry was a little tougher in a lot of cases, then you would also get somebody that maybe had a little bit more internal drive, took a little bit more personal responsibility, respected that a little bit more, because it was a little harder to get into this club, if you will. Yeah. And I don't want to be that guy that is the worst, right? Yeah, I'm okay not being great at this, but that I'm not resting on that. I don't want to be that guy forever, so I will change. I'll make these changes. But that is an interesting concept, because you're right. There are many different roles, hats that you guys got to wear. The term I use on here is a pie chart, right? There's many things that a law enforcement officer or whatever has to do. They have to be skilled at certain things, and then there's a rabbit hole for each one of those things that they can go down. And shooting is one of those components, combatives being one of those as well. But I wonder, just as the instructors that are teaching these post-level curriculum, I understand bureaucratically that it takes an act of Congress to make any kind of change, generally, probably at the level of like post, and particularly California post. So, but I've also talked to a lot of people that are instructors and instructors of instructors that have figured out a way to deliver the California post, or whatever their state is, AZ post, whatever, post training, get all that done, but then also add a ton of value, or really hit what they feel are the more important things for this person to be able to take away from this training today to become a better shooter, maybe encourage them to be able to do it. So let's talk about that.
So a lot of that, I think, comes down to just your instructor mindset, right? Do you understand how to teach, how to instruct those adult learning concepts, and not to get like super into the weeds and nerdy about it, but there is a level that, you know, people need to be able to listen to you, and you're kind of a salesman to a point, right? I'm selling you this idea, and this is what I want you to get from it.
I'm going to time you out for just a second, because what I heard you do right there was, I heard you minimize the learning styles and pedagogy and things that go into actually teaching a human being, or anything for that matter. We start looking at like operant conditioning, the things that we were talking about a little bit earlier at the beginning. Like, you said, let's not get too nerdy or sciencey about it. And I hear where you're going with that. We're trying to have a fairly sort of odd or open or broad discussion here. But I actually think that's a bigger part of the problem is not people aren't respecting that enough.
Yeah.
That, and the environments that we're teaching these things in are often much different than the environments that maybe people learned that are teaching them now, learned in prior, whether it's military or something else, some other very specific agency, very specific department, and some very specific team or whatever else. And they're trying to take that one way and do it across all these other people. Sorry to cut you off there, but I think that's a problem that we're not addressing more.
Right. So, firearms instructors, and it drives me nuts historically, they want to point the finger at their officers. They suck because they don't come to the range and train. They aren't putting in the time. They aren't putting in the effort. And we don't want to point the fingers at ourselves. But sometimes you kind of got to look at it and go, hey man, why aren't they coming to the range? Why there's obviously a disconnect there between what we want them to do and what they're actually doing. Right? And so as much as we want to point the finger at them and blame them for not being good shooters or not wanting to train, we have a just as big a finger pointing back at us going, well, why aren't they, why is it not, where's the incentive for them to come train, right? Clearly, they've had training with us before and they aren't eager to come back. Well, why is that?
Good question.
And
there's inspiration. There's also the incentivization, right? And then there's the realization that, I do need this or I don't need this. Those are all big things. Yeah, that's a very good point.
And so I kind of like to look at it going, hey, put myself in their shoes. Why would they not want to come back? And it's interesting because we've seen this a lot now with implementation of red dots, right? So before, you would have people come to the range, they would do their qual, they would suck at it, barely pass, right? They wouldn't get a whole lot of instruction. The firearms instructors there, they would just kind of rush them through quickly, get through this. Almost seemed like annoyed that, hey man, you're not very good. So they leave kind of feeling like shit. They weren't having fun. They weren't doing good. And it's like, no one will want to come. If you're not having fun, you're not doing very good, you're not seeing any improvement every single time you come, then what's the incentive for me why do I want to come back?
Really good point.
So, for an example, in the unit that I'm in, a group of guys, what's up dudes? Group of dudes, really good dudes. And it's the gang unit. And so you would want those guys to be very proficient with firearms. And they were fine shooters, right? They would show up, pass the qual, no issues. But they weren't shooters.
That's relating to the qual. Right. We've already established that that could be.
But they weren't like shooters, right? There's a shooter and then there's shooters. And yeah, so they passed the qual just fine. But again, take that with a grain of salt. So then we were one of the very first agencies to get red dots on our pistol. And this was 4 years ago, maybe.
Okay.
And so we went to the range. They saw I had a red dot on my pistol. They started shooting that. And they were iron sights before. And all of a sudden, will a red dot shooter, it won't make a bad shooter a good shooter, but it'll make a good shooter a better shooter, for sure. Mm-hmm. And it is easier. It's an easier sighting system to use. So they started shooting my pistols. And all of a sudden, they started seeing just drastic improvement that they'd never seen before. And so then what that learning kind of went into is then the following week, I have keys to the range. I can kind of use the range whenever. Hey, bro, let's go up. Let's go shoot. Let's go shoot. They constantly kept asking me to go up and shoot. All of a sudden, this group of people who didn't give a shit about shooting, was annoyed to have to go qual. All of a sudden, they're asking me weekly to go up and start shooting more and more and more. Then they went out and they bought guns, bought MOS guns. They bought their own optics. Now they have a financial investment into this. Yeah. They're motivated. So you take a group of what weren't shooters before, and now they are actually motivated, invested, want to train, care about training, are significantly better than where they were at. I think as a fire instructor, that's all you can ask for. All you can ask for is to get these guys or gals onto the range, motivated and caring about shooting. Then teaching them to shoot, obviously comes next, but we just got to get them there, and historically we've not done a good job, to relating to salesmen, we have not done a good job selling this coming to the range.
That's a really good point.
You know, so that's what we have seen. And a lot of that comes down to, hey man, how are we delivering this information? What is our attitude? I could be having a terrible day on the range. I could be tired. I may not want to be there. This might be back to back classes. I just want to go home. I'm hungry. I got a headache, whatever it is. No one in that class knows that. Everyone thinks I'm having the time of my life. This is the best time I'm having. Mm-hmm. I want to be at the range. I want to be there with all of them, joking, laughing, but also learning and shooting. And no one would sit there and go, God, that guy's being a dick. Oh, he's not having, he doesn't want to be here. He doesn't care. No one would know that. And they never will, because that's just how I'm going to present myself.
A solid lesson, I think, and message for people. And if you treated this like a business, mm-hmm. and that way you were in the business, whether you're being paid by the department as an adjunct duty or whatever else, you're being paid as a business person. Like, you would do everything you could to make your customer, happy and keep them coming back for more, right? That's what I do here on a daily basis. And if you showed up with a shitty attitude and nobody got any better at any of the things that they were doing, you just kept taking their money, mm-hmm. It's wasting their time,
yeah,
right? And then sending them out of here with, I don't know, hurt bodies, just hot and sweaty, and that's all they got out of it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not coming back either.
Right.
Yeah, if they're not getting results, they're going to lose motivation, right? And they're not going to want to keep coming back. I wanted to go back and talk about a little bit. You were talking about navigating post and
mm-hmm.
and being able to teach good quality information, yes. but also through post standards, right? So,
and somehow, like, if I could add to that question, like, somehow up the standard, still meet post, but create a higher standard in the process.
Yeah. So Wayne was saying we were one of the first. So, and I'll kind of preface, we were one of the first agencies in San Diego County, if not the only agency in San Diego County. I guess we didn't talk about that before, huh? So yeah, San Diego County, that were running pistol red dots.
Okay.
And so we kind of started a T&E phase, probably about 5 or 6 years ago. We actually fully implemented the program probably about 4 or so years ago.
Okay.
And when we did that, there was a lot of people T&ing these dots, and it started to kind of snowball a little
mm-hmm.
bit. And we're like, hang on a minute, right? Like, there's a lot of people carrying these dots now with zero training,
Yeah.
So, funny enough, I even had somebody come up to me, after carrying the dot for 6 months or so to T&E it and go, am I supposed to shoot this thing with both eyes open? And I'm like,
holy
this is what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I went to our guys and I'm like, look, we're doing our guys a disservice by just letting them throw dots on their guns and not actually telling them how to use them, right? So, and look, there could be the argument of like, hey, it's same fundamentals, right? You're shooting a gun. Yes. But there are some things that you need to know when you're shooting a red dot, right? So, and for us, so we go, hey, look, we're doing these guys a disservice. We need to implement some training. So we put together a class, started teaching that class, and then we go, hey, there's a lot of other agencies out there right now that are going to be transitioning to red dots, which is kind of what got us started in the instructor post course. That's kind of what kind of got us down
Huge
that road,
need,
right?
Yeah. Opportunity.
Right. So Wayne and I have been teaching the class for our department, the red dot transition course for our department since the implementation. So we go, hey, we need to transition this to an instructor course through post. We were the first ones to have a pistol red dot instructor course through post, through California Post. So
is that right?
There was no standard, right? So we kind of made the standard. We're like, hey, look, there was other red dot classes out there that were post approved, but they were not instructor courses. So,
okay. So there were red dot courses, but they're not post approved. So people could go and learn from, whoever, open enrollment somewhere, whatever they wanted to do.
And there were instructor courses out there, red dot instructor courses that were not post approved. There were also post approved red dot transition courses. So for the red dot operator, right? So like the line officer that wants to carry a red dot and goes, hey, department, I want to carry my red dot. Cool, go to this class. But as far as like an instructor course, there was no post-certified instructor course at the time. Right?
Understood.
I think SIG had a instructor course, but it wasn't post-certified. They were the ones running around for a while there. I think they still come around teaching their instructor course as well, but it wasn't post-certified. I don't know if it is now, but at the time it was not. So, which is why, our post coordinator was like, hey, it is the first one. So you guys you're the experts. You tell me what needs to be taught. Right. So, and there's been a lot of change in our course since we implemented.
It's evolved.
It's evolved a lot. And now we still hit all of those things that need to be hit for the class that was approved through post, right? But we can add stuff. Like there's nothing saying that you can't add things, right? And post allows that. They're like, hey, yeah, if you want to add stuff. So we're constantly kind of evolving and bettering our course. So the course that started 3 years ago or whatever it was 2 years ago as in the instructor course till now is pretty different. We're still hitting a lot of those same points, but we've added a lot of stuff. We've improved a lot of the information just because we're continuously students ourselves, right? We're always learning. We're going to learn from other dudes as well. So how long will it be before the original criteria that you guys were part of putting together will get examined again and maybe changed or evolved to what it is that you're currently doing now? Like, what does that process look like? Every 2 years, post put your course into modification. You have to update it. And they kind of reevaluate it. So every 2 years we kind of update it anyways. But again, like they're from what I've been told talking to our post guys, like, hey, yeah, you can add stuff. You just got to still hit the points that you. This is what I hear. Like I've talked to other guys that actually on the show that have been like, yeah, we realize like we have to hit this in their state. We have to hit these things, but we can get through this shit in 15 minutes,
right?
Which leaves us 2 or an hour and 45 minutes to go through all these other things. Let's give them some stuff. Let's get them shooting, right? Yeah. Let's get them, acclimated. Let's get them messing up. Let's get them better. How do we do that? I think is the point.
Yeah. And the argument you made of like, do you need a red on instructor course? Does it need to be posted? Hey man, if departments would send their people to these non-post certifications don't matter courses, that would be great. We wouldn't have to do a post-certified instructor level course, right? But the reality is departments, they care about certifications. And so it's a little bit of like, okay, we'll play your game. We'll do the certification program. I mean, it's not easy to get a post-class approved. And honestly, it's kind of an administrative headache.
I'm sure.
Doing that stuff. But we have such a belief in what we're teaching and how we're teaching in our program that it's like, okay, if that's what it takes for your department to send you to us, then we will do it. And that's how we'll operate it. So it's like, do you need, a red dot instructor course or a post red dot instructor course? Really should be the same thing. It's just we have to throw that post on there just
I understand.
because agencies
they're trying to standardize it.
We're trying to standardize it. And then, at the very beginning of the course, and this is the problem with post courses historically, and that people come in with this mindset of, oh God, it's a post course. And it's kind of the eye roll. And in the beginning of the class, we'll do, our roll call and say, hey, what do you want out of the course? Every once in a while, we'll get a guy who goes, I'm here for the certificate. And it's like, okay, well, I mean, I hope you get more out of it than just a certificate. And then very quickly on into the course, all of a sudden their eyes are opening up and they've realized like, oh, this is very different. This is not a standard post course. This is a lot more, I don't want to say advanced because fundamentals are fundamentals, but it is a little more advanced, harder for sure. A lot of information. They realize like, hey, not everyone is going to pass this course. We will fail you if you do not meet our standard. And our standard is, it's an instructor level course. It's higher. Our qualification, it's an A-zone box is our target that we use. We don't use a big Shrek. It's, hey, all rounds have to be in this A-zone box. And yeah, if you fail and you don't get the certification. Unfortunately, this course we just ran, about an hour into the course, I ended up having to remove somebody from the course going, you're just not at this level. Honestly, it's a little bit hazardous at this point. You got to go. And he was slice of humble pie. He took it, went home. Some of the other folks in the class were like blown away that even happened. They're like, I've never seen that before. And it's like, yeah, man, we are not what post historically has been. We have standards. You need to meet them. This is an instructor level. Don't jump into the deep end if you can't swim. And so it's kind of cool being post, but also kind of having this other training philosophy of like, hey, we're going, we're moving, we're advancing, we are increasing the tempo here. We are teaching you things you haven't thought about, know about. We are challenging you in ways that you didn't think you would get challenged in this course?
I mean, you guys just covered a ton of stuff there just about kind of the institution and some of the limitations that exist there, but also the workarounds to the limitations that do exist and how you've been able to influence it at a lot of different levels. And I think that what I hear a lot of, if I see, I see these conversations happening from guys that do what you do and other people that are chiming in, whether they do or they don't. My observation generally is usually there's a lot of complaining. There's a lot less of the conversation that you just had right there, or that you guys just, had with me right there about like, hey, there's all these things that make it, we have our druthers about. Like, it's not awesome. There's not enough time. There's not enough money. We wish they did a little bit more. But here's what we do have to work with, and here's what you have to work with as a student, and here's how we can make this way better. Instead of just bitching and moaning about it all the time, like what can we do to augment and enhance this thing so that we're all coming out the other end a little bit better, and to watch that evolve. I wonder, as you guys are out there teaching and you're instructing the instructor, this is kind of a bigger question, but because you're instructing the instructors, when you start a class or when people come to when these instructors come to the class, what do they think the biggest deficiencies are that they need to overcome for maybe themselves, but also for obviously the people that they're instructing back at their own departments or whatever else? And how do those stack up to what you see as being the biggest deficiencies? Can we talk through this?
Yeah. What I have found, and you can speak on it, from what I have found is, honestly, it's programming at their range. How do we conduct training, more or less? And when you come to our class, we give you absolutely everything we have. We give you our notes to our courses, the PowerPoint, everything we have to give you, we try to give you. But it is absolutely, hey, how do I get this drill to flow with this? Hey, these are my issues on the range doing it this way. How do I circumvent that and implement this drill? A lot of it is just, hey, how do I take a bare bone shooter and create some sort of structure to improve them? Kind of like more or less a transition course, if you will. That is personally what I have found is that a lot of people have struggled with. So
it's not about what they're actually teaching them to do with the firearm. It's how they're teaching them how to do it as an instructor and make it work so they're getting the most out of their class rather than, again, just following this tick list. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, I think, and you still have some of those people who are clickbaiting, pinning the trigger to the right. Like you still have that. That's
what I kind of was talking about, I guess.
Yeah, it's fortunately, it's kind of starting to get, when we first started years ago, it was like half the class would pin the trigger to the rear on reset, and it seems like there's enough, whether it's information out on the social media, whatever it is,
getting out there.
It's getting out that like, hey, certain things are not ideal. But how to implement a full structured program is tough. And we go to for example, a force on force. I've had this conversation ad nauseum, even with people in our own department, other departments, of how do you conduct force on force? And I've been to force on force instructor schools, which, to be honest, I didn't even like how they did it. I think if you're going to implement a force on force program, a lot of the most important things aren't even being addressed. Hey, what did you even see when you pulled the trigger? Where were your sights? There's zero accountability. And force on force classes.
That comes up pretty often.
Yeah, zero accountability. And if somebody misses, the argument is always, it's a sim guns. They're not accurate. It's like, no, man, let's go to the range. We'll put you at 10 yards. I guarantee you all these sim guns will hit a torso at 10 yards. Don't blame that. I could see in your shooting, you weren't looking at your sights at all. And it's issues like that. You dress up like the Michelin Man. That isn't helpful in force on force either. There's no repercussions for bad tactics. Role player responsibilities. Hey, you're a role player. You get shot. Act like you got shot. Stop fucking around. Stop doing other things, running around. Because now, instead of validating something proper that they actually did, now you just kind of set them up for failure. Now we're just playing paintball, running around. So a lot of it is just range programming, structuring, what to look for in shooters, how to kind of build this crawl, walk, run type of format in courses.
So I get that. That's where you're seeing their biggest deficiencies are, right? In coming in. I'm curious to hear your take too, Jesse. But I also want to know, and that's, you're recognizing this. Do they even recognize this before they show up? Or is this something that they're getting while they're working with you guys?
Yeah, I think it's kind of both. So oftentimes in our classes, we have like a wide variety of experience levels.
Mhm.
So we'll have dudes that
typical,
are
right?
just, burning it down. And then there's other dudes that are like, maybe is a little advanced for them, right? Some dudes that show up, and we don't just teach red dot, right? But talking about like the red dot stuff, it's like some dudes show up, they're like, oh, I just put it on last night, right? And then other guys have been like, I've been shooting with it for 3 years, right? So, but we still hold them to a standard, because if we're going to give them a certificate and say that you passed our, I hate using the word standard, but that you passed,
the requirement,
our requirements, right? To be a instructor. And we don't fail a lot of people. We try to work with people and get them to pass, because their agencies are spending money. They're spending money. And realistically, you don't need a post certificate to teach this stuff to your guys, but the department wants that validation that, hey,
it's also covering your ass.
It is a CYA thing for sure. But yeah, like Wayne was talking about, when we first started this thing too, there was guys that, were doing things like click banging, or they were, the certain things that they were doing with their fundamentals were just way off. And then we talk about something like, you'd see eyes open, like, what? Where now it's because of social media and other instructors out there that are teaching a lot of the same stuff, which is great, right? You get a lot of people just like head nods, right? Like, yep. I know
heard
that.
this. I've practiced this. I've seen this.
Still a lot of dudes
that are not earth or profound information to me.
Right.
Yep.
And still a lot of dudes that are maybe doing things, not correct or not as efficient, but they maybe know, and they go, yeah, I know it's something I need to work on. Right. So we have seen a big shift in that. We've also seen a big shift in from the beginning of making our first post class, which was the red dot class. That was our first post class that we wrote. Seeing the pushback from all these departments, right?
Talk about that.
So when we first started this thing, we would ask at the beginning of the class, like, who's here on their own dime? We'd see a huge group of people raising their hand, like, okay, why are you here? Well, I'm trying to change the mindset for our department, right? I'm trying to get our admin, or I'm trying to get the chief or whoever it is to change the mindset on pistol red dot stuff. And we would ask, hey, who's getting pushback from their agencies? Half the class or more would raise their hand, right? And now we're to the point where most of our classes, nobody's raising their hand. Or you might get one person that's like, yeah, we're still getting a little pushback. It might be a bigger agency, like either a 3-letter agency or a state agency or something like that, going like, yeah, we still get a little pushback, but I'm trying to change that mindset. For the vast majority of them, their agency's sending them to the class now. Like, they all want to transition because they see, and a lot of the times a lot of these agencies follow along their big agency, right? So, if it's a LA County thing and they see LAPD doing it, now all these little agencies go, oh, we got to do that now, right? So they're just following along with what the big agency did. They go, oh, well, they did it, so now we can do it.
I think this is actually, when we think about this, I'm listening to you and you're talking about this first red dot post course coming out 4 years ago.
About 3, the instructor course, probably about 3 years ago.
Okay,
now.
So we're talking about 3 years, and we were talking about, the hand raising of like performance that we're pushing back. And I remember, it's still happening, but to some degree, somebody, there was something that popped up on social media the other day that kind of restirred the conversation. But if we went back 3 years, right, and people were talking about red dots, there were still a lot of people going, no, it's not better than irons, right? And then over time, that kind of stopped, right? And I was like, okay, we get it. And you mentioned it. It's not going to make you a great shooter, but it makes a good shooter, potentially a better shooter, better at whatever their goal they're trying to get done. The point of this is going back to it takes an act of Congress and it takes a long time to turn a ship. You think about it, all the law enforcement agencies out there, all the bureaucracy that actually exists, there's finance, there's conversations that need to be had, there's finance that needs to be talked about, allocated, which is always going to be hard, right? Like, I have to make decisions in, I don't know, we're in February of 2024 to actually get it to be implemented in January of 2025, right? So there takes time. The reality of this is, on the red dot thing, it hasn't taken very long.
No.
And I think people are like, it seems like an eternity,
right?
But it hasn't taken very long. And to me, that's actually kind of positive news that it can be influenced that way. Like, when the good stuff shows up, right? And we do a good job with it, Like, oh, we need to do this, and it catches fire, like what you're saying.
Yeah.
The interesting part about it is red dots, they are newer to law enforcement. And I wouldn't even say they're new to law enforcement. They've been around for a few years, but they've been in competition for the last 40 years.
Yep.
You know, so it's taken a long time for us to go
bridge that gap.
Absolutely. But once it's been bridged, and then all of a sudden we're very quickly seeing the results of them. And there's a lot of studies. Colleges have done studies. Aaron Cowan did a force-on-force study with it. National Law Enforcement Firearms Instructor Association is doing like a continuing how OISs
to validate
how red dots are doing in OISs and looking at the statistics behind it. It's very obvious. Like it's almost morally and ethically flawed to try to push red dots away. Once you kind of really look at the data that they're providing,
looking at it, yeah,
you know, it really is. And so if you look at it, and you know, I say sometimes agencies would rather pay a 7-8 figure settlement check than a 6-figure training budget. But now
that's a problem.
It's a huge problem. But now that we, through the last few years, have accumulated, albeit a still rather small group of data to support this. Like we said, when we started this, a lot of hands were going there. Now, maybe one in class, you know? So that's super...
that's positive news.
It's great. Yeah.
It's positive news.
And I think it's going to be like, you know, now if you went to a rifle class anywhere, right? Like nobody's running irons in a rifle class, right? I think give it another 5-10 years. I hope that's what you're going to see in law enforcement is like everyone's showing up. Mm-hmm. There's going to be like one guy running irons. Everyone's going to be like, what's up with this weirdo, you know? But not to say that irons are bad, right? Like irons are still fun. Like, cool. You shoot production or limited and you run iron sights and that's your thing. Cool. Awesome. Right. I'm not trying to knock iron sights, but it's very helpful with a red dot because most of the time when people are shooting irons, they're shooting with one eye closed, right? I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. But I'm saying that that's what most people do. So now if we can get these guys who aren't like super, super great shooters and, you know, they're always shooting with one eye closed, shooting iron sights. And now we give them a red dot and go like, you have to shoot both eyes open. And we teach them how to do that. And now they're shooting both eyes open. Now it's opening up that field of view and they're gaining so much more information. And especially in like a force-on-force situation.
Game changer.
It's a game changer, right? So I think you're going to see bad shoots go way down. You know, and better accurate. We already have seen better accuracy in law enforcement, right? So just because we're picking up more data from that target or that threat or whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah, I think so. Again, like the evolution of things and how they're happening and the patience level that people do and don't have for the evolution of this training. And obviously you guys are going to be very biased because you're instructors and you're out there and you're doing this quite frequently versus the officer that's just showing up to do his job every day and also trying to get home to be with his family and, you know, works the weekends, which is when a lot of these classes happen. So he's like, even if he wanted to go, like he's on shift, you'd have to ask for time off or all that kind of stuff. Like, cause we that came up earlier, just like excuses or, you know, but you saying like, hey, let's recognize like there's a lot for these guys to be doing all the time. Here's my question in all of this. How do we encourage culturally? Okay, so this isn't like you can't say for per department because everybody's got their own policies, their own, you know, finances and, you know, economics of things and how things work. Small departments versus large departments, where their resources are, where they're not, all that kind of stuff. From a cultural perspective, how do we stop this this constant bad mouthing of what's not good enough and move towards more of the conversation like how do we get to better? Because what I see, and this is a pretty large question, and I got both of you here, which is why I'm asking it, because I think we can kind of go back and forth on this a little bit. The reason I'm asking this is because, again, I see just a ton of, you've got some people like you guys, but not you guys, but they train a lot, they shoot a lot, they go compete, they do stuff on their own time, on their own dime. They dry fire every day. They get into these little circles of conversation about how bad everybody sucks. And it's, you know, they're just not going to get better. And it's the department and it's admin. And until admin starts doing things differently, it's never going to change or whatever. I don't believe that to be true. that it's all admin and this is all going to come from the top down. I think this is a cultural thing that happens from the inside. I have my own thoughts on this, but I wonder about you guys and kind of your experience, because you guys are out there, and your thoughts on this. Like, how do we change that culture from the inside rather than expecting it to happen from the top down?
So, I mean, like Wayne said before, I don't know if it's ever going to shift to where everyone's going to be like a super proficient shooter.
Point number one. Yep.
So
okay.
I don't ever see that completely taking a turn, right? Which where everyone's going to be like, I'm gung ho about shooting, going to the range and learning, right?
That's not going to be a popular answer,
right?
But I think it's reality. A very true answer. Yeah,
it's reality. And there's, like I said, there's so many different things that they have to know how to do. And some people put a lot of eggs in one basket. You know, if that's either, hey, they're a DTAC guy and they like doing jiu-jitsu all the time and they're not maybe a great shooter, but like their thing is jiu-jitsu or whatever it is, right? Or someone's like really invested in working dope or working gang members or whatever, and that's like their passion. So I don't know if we'll ever get everybody passionate about shooting guns, right? Or passionate about doing any sort of fight sports or anything like that. But when I started, there wasn't, and not at the agency that I'm now, but like in the academy and our previous agency that we were at, there wasn't like a lot of motivation. We'd go to the range, all the range guys were dicks, and they'd be like, "What's up? What do you want? Oh, why'd you put that on your gun?
This is a common tale. This is a common
You think
tale.
that makes you good? You think that makes you better? This is lame." Whatever Wayne was talking about, they would say, "Oh, well, if you don't shoot a 45, then you're kind of a little bitch, whatever," right? When I was in the academy, I shot a Glock 17, right? I wasn't even old enough to buy it at the time. My dad bought it and transferred it to my name after because I needed a gun for the academy.
Because California,
right? So, so I was shooting a Glock 17. I remember there was a girl in my class. I won't say her name, but she was shooting really nice. At the time, everyone was into at this department. Everybody was into SIG 226, right? 45s, or it was was that 220? So she had this really nice, like it was all decked out, whatever. She couldn't shoot. She couldn't hit anything, right? And I remember the instructor going to me like, "Hey, look at she's shooting this 45 and you're shooting a 9. Like, why are you shooting a 9?" And I'm like, "Well, look at my target though. I'm hitting everything I'm shooting at. Like you could shoot a bazooka at a target, and if you miss, then it doesn't do any good, right? It doesn't matter." So I guess kind of we try to be super approachable on the range. We try to be, try to maybe mentor a little bit more than just talk shit to our people that aren't doing as well. And I think that in general, across the board, as instructors in law enforcement, being more approachable, being there to help your people get better is going to change a little bit, right? It will help a little bit. It's, again, we're never going to get everybody on board, but the people that you're scaring away maybe might not be scared away anymore because you're not being a dick to them, right? Maybe implementing some training on, like we have open range days, like I mentioned, right? Twice a month. I was trying to implement some like open range day trainings where it's like, hey, it's not paid, but you can come up and I'll teach. I did 4 blocks of 2-hour classes. Anybody at the department, any sworn can sign up, come up and I'll teach. I stood up there all day and taught. And I could have sat in a chair and just signed people in and handed them ammo. You know what I mean? Yep. But I was up there trying to teach and trying to get people better. And I had some people show up. And what's helping is that we have a young department now, right? After COVID and the riots and all the other crap going on, people started jumping ship, retiring, weren't hiring. Now it's like this huge influx of hiring. So we got a lot of young people.
Opportunity there.
And a lot of them are hungry, like they want to go out, they want to learn the job, they want to learn how to shoot, they want to learn how to fight, they want to learn, like they're young, they're hungry, and it's great.
Should be embracing that.
Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do, right? So and that's why we're trying to do stuff like that and kind of mentor rather than just be dicks.
If you are not leaving the range mentally and physically exhausted after a day of instructing, you're doing it wrong. Every time I leave the range, I'm like, oh, I'm tired. I need to go get some bourbon.
It's big energy exchange there, right?
Yeah, it really is. But you can tell the guys who leave and they're feeling 100%. It's like, you did that wrong. You did that wrong. you should be leaving even more exhausted than the people actually shooting.
It's a good perspective, man. I look at that come from the coaching thing and how exhausting it is to, train 8 clients a day or
you have
back
to be
to back
locked
to back
on the entire time.
Did the 6 a.m. appointment get the same attention and the same Scott that the 4 p.m. appointment got, later that day kind of thing? And if not, why not?
Yeah.
You guys are making a really good point here. And I some people would listen to this and go, no, that's the problem. Like, you guys are just being soft. And I would tell that person to shut the fuck up, because this goes back to what you're saying about you got to want people to want to be there. Or you should want people to want to be there. And you have to be looking at yourself going, what am I doing or not doing to encourage this? This comes from admin. Like, what are you doing to encourage them to want to be there? What are you doing to support the people that are encouraging them to want to be there? All those kind of things. So look, it is a bigger problem, but I look at this too. Like, we're talking very specifically about shooting and firearms training. I would think, like, if I'm out there on the street and I have no fucking idea, so I just want to be really clear about this. I have no clue what this is like. But I have been around the block a few times in a few other places in life and business and just in life, right? Whether it be in competition or whatever. There are people that you come across along the way where you're like, this dude gets it. Like, you're looking at him, you look up to him. And I imagine it's like that. I don't know. Maybe it's the shift sergeant, right? Who shows up that you guys look at as a resource. Like, if I'm in trouble, like if I need some help on something, like if I'm not sure what call to make, or I've made a call now and I need to validate some things or I have questions, I don't hesitate to call this person.
Right.
Like, I want to call this person and go, hey, Sarge, like, this just happened. I need your help. And then the guy on the other end, or the person on the other end, guy, woman, whatever, goes, hey, how can I help you? Right. And let's talk through this together, or let's work through this problem. And I imagine there's going to be some levels of this depending on where you find yourself in the journey and your experience, or whatever else. Because if I'm that brand new person, when you mentioned all the new people coming in, I'm not going to know where to go. But it's going to hit me pretty quickly probably when I do see the resource, whether that's just another patrol cop that seems to have it all together and has the right relationships and run an even keel, puts the energy in, people seem to like him or her or whatever else, to the shift sergeant, to whatever. But I would imagine as you start to move through the process of the journey and you get yourself involved in other things, it might feel and look a little different when you're maybe on a special unit, where things are a little drier. They're a little bit more maybe in your face. But at that point, you've had these experiences to understand maybe the reasons why it is. It's a little short. It's like, no, we don't fuck around like, like that. Or going back to your guys on your team, the gang unit, that are like, no, we're going out to shoot today. And we're not doing a lot of talking. We don't have to stroke each other, right? Here, like, this is a thing. Like, this is what we do here, versus the young guy who has no earthly idea what that looks, feels, smells, sounds
100%
like.
Yeah.
You mentioned something that we're soft. Depending on who is there, right? I don't need a fun day at the range to, one, enjoy it, and two, be better. Some days at the range for me are super frustrating. That's okay. I'm good with that. It's not going to deter me from, in fact, it's probably going to do the opposite and make me come back the following day because I left frustrated because I was just dropping rounds or fumbling reloads or funky draws or whatever it was, right? If I'm frustrated, that's fine. It affects me nothing. In fact, it motivates me. And we have guys at our range, and a little bit, and we are fortunate where we are a small enough department, about 160 sworn. We're small enough that we can we individually know each shooter, their skills, capabilities, their background, and we can kind of know how to throttle up or down on them a little bit. Hey, this guy's very competent, SWAT guy, maybe former mill guy. I can challenge him and I can push him harder than I can push this person who just graduated from college with their whatever degree, right? And
has very little life experience.
With their arts degree, and very little. Still, mom's gonna have a hot meal ready for him or her when she gets home. It's like
laundry folded at the edge of the
bed. The most stressful thing in their life is
the commute to and work.
Yeah, the commute to and from work. And it's like, I can't throttle down on this person as much. Yeah. I have to format my training. I have to format how I address them. I have to. Again, I have to really think about, hey, how do I convey this information to this person that they will receive it well and be encouraged, versus how do I format my information to this, soft dude who's now at our department who can be challenged and can get pushed harder and can learn from his failures without being overly frustrated impacted or discouraged, right? This person makes a mistake, they're discouraged, they don't want to come back. This person makes a mistake, they're discouraged, they want to come back.
Right.
And there's absolutely two different ways to address those people and to kind of massage the same message across. It really, and a lot of that comes down to just the experience. You train, be an instructor, instruct more. I got to tell you, when I almost feel bad for the first couple of guys who came to our Red Dot course. I almost want to give them their money back.
I say the same thing about when I started my career.
Right?
I didn't go back and apologize to a lot of fucking people.
Yes. I was trying to emulate somebody maybe I wasn't my own whatever it was,
Right.
Just the formatting, the drills, whatever it was. And then over time, the more you do it, the more it's like, okay, this is my niche. This is what I have found success at. And this is how I need to pursue it, And so I think that's very important. Now, larger agencies, our former SO, they're 3,000 plus. No way that guy's going to know every single shooter. They have different limitations.
It's a different job. Yeah.
Totally different job. That department, the only training they authorized or they gave you on duty was, hey, go to your quarterly qual, and then you immediately go back in your patrol car and go 10-8 again.
Right.
And so those guys, they don't have the time allotted like we do. They do allow shooters to come at their range and shoot there. But again, I did that a lot. There was no one ever out there with me. I was shooting by myself, really doing really poor things because you don't know what you don't know. And so, yeah.
I think part of this is what I'm taking away from this. There is no one size fits all to this. Like, you have to understand the culture that you're within, and you have to adjust to that very specifically. But fundamentally, it's still the same. And that is, you have to have people that want to be there, that want to get better. And it's the people that are there that are going to influence that, not somebody else in an office that's telling that person they should feel compelled to want to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time telling you they need to get better because you're the instructor.
Mm-hmm.
Like they get better. Like, what is better?
Yeah.
Like what is better for this person? And like, and it might not be necessarily completely tangible on a target, right? It's just the attitude or the willingness to want to go out and train or
ask
the questions more, and be more open to receiving the message that you're trying to give them.
Yeah. And I wanted to go back to kind of, I know Wayne touched on a little bit about like being soft on the range, right? We both came up with dudes on the range that were not being soft. They were dicks. They were trying to like implement stress, not our agency now, but the prior agency, right?
But you train enough, you're probably going to come across a couple of those, those folks.
Yeah.
So, but to say it's soft without having gone through that experience, right? Like, what are you comparing it against?
Yeah, sure.
And again, I don't need to implement any more stress on people that are already stressed out being there, right? They're trying to learn. They're stressed that you're watching them, and now you add timers and everything else.
There's a time and place for adding more or less, right?
Right. And when we're on the range, we're teaching shooting. We're trying to make them faster, more efficient, more effective with their firearm, right? When we start doing scenarios, that's when we're implementing the tactics part of it. And
I would expect the shooting to suffer.
Right.
When that happens.
So, and the shooting should be, that's why we're trying to get people more focused on, hey, look, when we're on the range, we're teaching shooting. We're trying to get you to that point to where the shooting part of it is running in the background.
Happening in the background,
right?
Yep.
Everything else, now when you're in that scenario, you can think about the decisions that you need to be making and not how I'm gripping the gun, how I'm pressing the trigger, how much input am I putting back into the gun to get those sights back down on target? I'm not losing my sights and all these things, right? Mm-hmm. So we don't need to implement that stress. And like we said before, man, like, we're more approachable. Then we got people actually coming up and asking questions that they may have been afraid to ask if we weren't, right? If we were being dicks about it. So I think a lot of the times people that go like, oh man, they're being soft, whatever. A lot of times that's a cover. It's a cover, right? Yeah, or you can fight Wayne. But it's a cover because maybe they suck, right? And so instead of improving themselves and being nice and cool guys, they're just going to be dicks to everybody, right? And how many of those dicks have you seen shoot on the range? Because for us, it's a huge thing. like if you're at a class and your instructor is not demoing stuff, and now some people have different opinions about demos, right? Like, oh, you just shoot the same demo over. Hey, look, if you're able to go to a class and the person who's teaching that class can demo something to a high level that says something about their skill. And for us, like, and we bring dudes on to teach for us as well, right? We have a couple instructors that teach for us as well. Our big thing is like, they need to know how to teach, but they also need to know how to do. If you can't do, how are you going to teach somebody fundamentals on how to grip the gun, how to press the trigger, how much input to put into the gun, all the stuff that we're looking at when we're shooting and doing fundamental stuff, transitioning targets and all that stuff. If you can't do it yourself, how do you explain that to somebody, right? So you kind of have to have both, right? So
this goes back to the moral and ethical obligation. Like if you can't do it, then you need to move on and let somebody else move in that can.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And you have a shelf life. Everyone has a shelf life. It's just incumbent upon you to recognize what it is, man. If you've been out of the game for a while, you got to do some real self-assessment here and do yourself and do the industry a favor and go, I'm not the guy anymore. It's not my time. The material I'm putting out is subpar. It's time for me to fade away in the background. Yep. We have that too. My shelf, it's obviously not right now, but eventually there's going to be a time where it's like, I'm not able to perform anymore. I'm not able to see, whatever it is. Or maybe, hey man, I've been doing this for 20 years.
I'm done.
The passion's gone. Yep. And that's very important.
That's got to be, that's another big realization. It's like, why are you here?
Some people try to hang on to it for a really, really long time, right? If they are out of the game. But for us, like we're still young enough to be able to continue to be students, and we're continuing to learn. Again, we have zero ego when we go into classes. Like ego's checked at the door. We've had guys that like point out something in class, like, hey, I've tried it like this and it works for me. We're like, cool, come up here and teach it, right? This is an instructor class. Tell everybody else that works for you. So like zero ego. We don't go into classes going like, hey, we know everything, listen to everything that we're telling you, right? Hey, let's talk about it. If you got something, bring it up, man. Let's discuss it.
We really we don't need to do this. Like we both are so full-time. We have him come elsewhere. We do this because we're passionate about it, because we care, because we want to see this change. So for us, there's no part of the set we're beating on our chest. I need to be the man, the person in charge of this. Like, hey, we're passionate about this. We care. I want you to be able to go home at the end of the day with your family.
Yeah, and look at our social media. That explains a lot. We don't care about the fame, dude. Like we're not influencers, we're not good at that kind of stuff. We just want to, and honestly, like, and that's why I said like we're so honored to be on the show, because to us, like we're just two cops that want to teach other dudes how to shoot guns, right? Like we're not trying to be like the influencers and the famous dudes. Like that's not us.
I think you guys are nailing it. I think that is very apparent. The passion is one thing. The drive to do it is another. The reasons why I think are super important. And when I certainly there are lots of people out there that do an amazing job with this and make a full-time living doing that. I know several of them. I've had lots of guys on the show, lots of people on the show. There's a ton of people I've met and I want to continue to meet. Some guys are a little bit more famous than others, for whatever the reasons are. But at the end of the day, there is this deep fire burning in the belly that you guys just mentioned. And again, some guys also have a little bit of fire maybe about being a little bit more famous, while they're doing it.
And that's fine. And here's the thing.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
That brings business. For us, a lot of it now is it's word of mouth through agencies, right? So all these law enforcement agencies, instructors, they all talk to each other, which is why we're up here in the Bay Area at least once a month now, right? Like we have classes up here every month because it's word of mouth within law enforcement, firearms instructors. So for us, it's not like as big of a hang up, right? For the dudes that are teaching a lot of civilian classes, like it's a must. And a lot of them, we know a lot of those guys too. And we've talked to them about it. And it's like, yeah, they hate it too. But, it's for business. Sometimes it has to be.
It is a business at the end of the day. I think, like, before we kind of transition this conversation a little bit, I would love to hear from you guys because of the experiences that you're having with other instructors, as well as the ones that you've already had within your own departments and things that you do. For admin that might be listening to this, what suggestions can you give them or advice can you give them about how to support the guys and their agencies that are doing the things that you're doing, and maybe other guys that come into their agency to teach their officers how to be better.
Yeah.
I would say listen to the experts.
Damn.
Don't
Exactly what I was going to say.
I mean, and that's the problem in law enforcement is you get bars on the collar. And no offense to our admin, they're great people. But you get, and I'm saying that sincerely. We actually really love our
Yeah, no, I hear
staff.
this all the time though.
But and our admin staff is great about it. Like they're like, cool, you guys know what you're doing.
Spare no expense.
Do the training. Here's the money, right? Which is awesome. Which is a huge plus for us. But most agencies still, they get bars on the collar and they know everything, right? And you go, hey, this is how we should do it. And they go, you don't need to do that. You don't need to do that, right? Listen to the experts.
Yeah. So, remember where you came up, stay in your lane. Hey, if you were an investigations guy, but you hardly ever spent any time on the range, stop making decisions for the range. I understand, part of it is a big ego thing, right? If the higher you climb, I kind of have this philosophy of like, well, there's a little bit of it is ego driven as well, like wanting to be the guy. And that's not everybody, but I think there's a lot of people within that realm where that's what drives them and that's what pushes them is wanting to inflate their ego. And so it's very hard once you get to that position, talking to somebody 3 ranks under you going, hey, help, I need help. I don't know anything about this. What do I do?
I think there's a couple different things. Like I try to be very objective when I look at the outside. Again, I mentioned these conversations and I just asked this question. I try to be objective and look at like, what is the liability of the officer on the street with the firearm that they carry and the things that they run into, and how does that relate to you guys and what you're doing both internally with the departments that you work with and then the other people, and those layers of liability and how people have to internalize that, and then also do certain things, make certain decisions out on the street or in the course of their day and their job in order to not get caught off guard and be caught with their pants down kind of thing. Shooting, being in a gunfight, obviously big deal. That's a lot of liability.
Yeah. And,
everything from the DV to the traffic stop to just sitting there in your car at a stoplight now. We've seen a lot of horrible shit. But I also look at it and go, okay, admin, like why does there seem to be such a disconnect? And like what liability are they facing that seems to be making these decisions or what you're saying so difficult at times for them to maybe adopt or accept? And I try to think about this, and you just mentioned about that, what you're saying, and this leads into something else. And that is that they're sparing no expense for you guys and they are giving you, the autonomy and the flexibility you need in order to do the best things you can for those people that are underneath them. That is giving up. What that's doing is making a very good decision about liability management and giving it to the people that you trust to manage that liability that happens on the street for those people.
Mm-hmm.
So their liability is making the wrong decision about in the investment, like writing that check, signing off on that dude, allowing this red dot to be put on this pistol for these people. And they're breaking it all down. They're trying to make all these decisions. And I could see, I'm just saying, that could be very overwhelming for the person with the bars on their collar. Yeah. And so I want to respect that. But at the same time, I would call them out on the floor and go, is that the decision that you should be making though?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a certain level of, being risk adverse. And our department's no different. Then we decided to change that going, we cannot be so risk adverse, because the reality is if someone gets hurt or something bad happens, they're not, for the most part, they're not going to look at Wayne and Jesse and go, hey, why did this person get hurt in this scenario or this drill or whatever? They're going to go higher up and those are the ones who really have to accept the blame and accountability for it. And to an extent, if we do something atrocious, but if it's a freak accident that something happened that what you couldn't avoid,
these things are going to happen.
They're going to happen, and so there is this level of like, well, what's it worth to them, being so risk adverse versus not, and that's kind of what we found, especially with staffing being what it is and it's so hard. Is we also kind of need to be treated like eggs, where it's like, man, we can't break another one. We don't have anyone to replace this person.
Right.
So they have much more of a balancing act, where we're on the range. We just want to go full throttle because all we care about is shooting, the range, improving you. We don't care at that point in time. We don't care about staffing levels. We don't care about money. We don't care about any of the political pushback, how this is going to look if this information don't care about any of that. We care about this one isolated thing. They have to care about 10 different things. So there is a little bit of like, hey, listen to your subject matter experts and
let them help you make the right decision here.
100%.
That's where I'm going with this.
100%.
Yeah. And Wayne said before, oftentimes it's a give and take. So, and we know that, right? So we might ask for the world and then they go, hang on now, right? Like, let's throttle back on this a little bit. And so then we go, cool. Like this is a give and take, right? Like originally when we asked for our internal department red dot training, because we're like, hey, there's a whole lot of dudes carrying red dots and they don't know what they're doing with them, right? They're shooting them one eye closed, whatever else, right? They don't really know what they're supposed to be focusing on. I need some time to train these guys to not do them a disservice. It's a department liability issue. So they go, cool, how much time do you need? 16 hours. They go, cool, you can have 4, right? So it's like, hey, we'll ask for a lot and we'll get what now we're doing 8 hours.
That's a skill. That's a negotiation skill.
Exactly. So
being a salesman.
So we're doing 8-hour class now, right? But it's a lot of that that kind of give and take. So and we know that we don't get butt hurt when we go, hey, we want to do this, and they go, well, hang on, can we do it like this instead? Like, okay, cool, we'll take that. You know what I mean?
So they had me and one of my partners at work design our new gym. So we already have one normal gym in our department. Then we were building an outside gym. And it's like, hey, you two dudes, give us a list of the things you want. And thing after thing after thing, to the point where I'm asking for cold plunges and saunas. And,
awesome.
We have a really nice setup down there. But that's why I had to tell the lieutenant at the time and told her like, hey, I'm the gas, you're the brakes. I'm going to step on the gas and I'm going to keep going and going and going and going until you put the brakes on me. So as long as you keep saying yes, I'm going to keep asking for things.
Well, and like I was saying before, a lot of the admin and the higher ups at some of these smaller agencies, they watch the big agencies, right? Because that alleviates some of that liability on them. So they go like,
oh yeah, they're just waiting to see like, okay, it's okay now. I feel better about
hey,
this.
LAPD did it. Cool. Yeah. Now, us in wherever small department now, okay, I feel comfortable doing this now,
I get
right?
that.
So I think that's why we see a lot of that. Once the big agency does the transition, then all the small agencies do the transition. So it kind of alleviates some of that.
That seems like a pretty, that's the trend I see too. Right. Like when I talk to other folks that are in other departments or just kind of just seeing what's happening in general. There are larger departments sometimes that seem to be pushing a little faster than others, which is great to see. But at the same time, I guess what I'm sort of taking away from this, I think that's great advice. It's very simple advice. And you take that as leadership and decide and think about that. Just put that in the hopper for a minute and go, who are the experts that I should be listening to? And who are the people on my team that are experts at this stuff that I'm not? And that how much mileage could I buy by going to a Wayne and a Jesse and going, hey, you guys are my experts and I need your help with this decision. I can't promise you we can get you everything, but what are the things that we need to do to make our officers better? And how much mileage could you get then when they start to trickle this down? And maybe there's a guy that walks into one of your courses who's going, yeah, that Lieutenant Smith, he's a real piece of shit. And you go, you know what, actually, he's not. And we wouldn't be here without him. So number one, like understand this is how it works and this is the support that he's given us to be able to give to you. Secondly, shut your fucking mouth.
Yeah, we don't.
Which then is, again, that from a cultural perspective is like, oh, then I don't just walk around complaining about admin and talk about shit I don't know about.
We don't see everything going on behind the curtains either, right?
No, so they might know stuff you don't know.
Yeah, and I'm sure like Wayne and I have probably ran around and bitched about stuff too, but like at the same time, we understand that there's stuff going on back there that we don't know. We're not privy to that, right?
Yeah.
So
and we coming from two totally different types of really huge agency versus a medium-sized, smaller agency. We've seen the issues with both. And I mean, I got to tell you, any department who will start listening to you a little bit and make these changes like ours has, man, that's kind of a rarity, which is kind of sad to say, but it is. And I would go out on a limb and say the training that we get our department is far and beyond better than probably 99% of agencies out there. And I honestly, I truly believe that, but it's only that way when we realize like, hey, we're struggling in this arena. And sometimes it takes a bad incident or a kick in the dick to go, gosh, we need to change something. You know, one of the interesting things about ours is one of the reasons they spare no expenses. It's a recruitment incentive. Hey, you come to our agency, Look at how many hours of training you get. Look at what we can do. Spare no expense. We're at different venues training, vehicles, equipment. We bought a bunch of GoPros that we can put all over buildings and stuff that you can watch and review how you've done. Literally, I can't recall a single thing that we've asked for where they've said no. And it's,
you might not just get it right now, right away. You just got to keep working on it, right?
If
no
you
for
look at
now, but not no forever.
The incidences and the OASs that have happened in our city, and for being a smaller agency, our agency has gotten into a lot of OASs, and our officers have performed exceptionally well. Now, I'm not going to sit here and take credit for that by any means, going, oh, this is because it's not. They did what they did, and they deserve all the credit in the world. However, I can't help but think, like, would that have been different if, the last OAS we got in, the training before that, we put up a scenario that emulated almost that exact thing to a T, almost the exact same thing. And so it's like, I wonder if that scenario made a lasting impression on this person, and this is why they performed good. Maybe it didn't. I don't know. We'll never know. But I think if you look at our training and then the results out in the field, it's hard to want to change things now and go back to how they were. Because then it's, but we've been performing exceptionally well.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the leadership has to make some checks get signed, policies get written based on data. It's a huge part of it. So you have to be able to show your work somewhere along the line there. So to that point, like, no, you might not be able to draw a specific line dot to dot on that thing. But what you could say is, like, well, if it hadn't happened, it certainly wouldn't have influenced it in any way whatsoever, and you did. So you guys are making a lot of really great, I think, statements, comments, and it reminds me, I've actually had a couple of these conversations and listened to a couple of conversations probably just in like the last 10 days. And what I hear you saying is you feel very fortunate, and that it's, almost like it's an anomaly that, the support that you guys get and the resources that you're being afforded and the experiences that you're having. It's very positive, and you guys have had nice things to say about your admin, but also recognize we're all humans and there's things and whatever else. And I just want to say this. Again, I've heard several of these conversations lately that are very, very familiar to this one or sound familiar to this one. And that is that there are agencies that are doing great things and allowing, guys like you, firearms instructors, to come in and do the things they need to do to better their department, giving or allowing resources, building gyms, encouraging other outside, instructors to come in to teach, so that you guys are getting in front of you guys being like the instructors or other officers getting in front of those experts that are out there, professional shooters from the civilian world, also from the LEO world or other things. There's a lot of positive stuff happening there. And in a world of where I think it's very tough to be in law enforcement right now, we've watched it get really weird over the last several years. Budgets are tighter. Things are a little wilder out on the streets. I mean, we're in California. It seems to be kind of wild, the wild, wild west out here right now. I guess the point I really want to make is there are good things happening. And when I hear like, oh, it's a terrible time to be in law enforcement, when I hear you guys talk about it, I'm like, I don't think that at all. I think it's been rough, right? And there's going to be rough times, and there always has been. But there are adjustments being made, and there are positive things happening. And I think you were talking about like the newer, hungrier people coming in. I often hear about how shitty the new person is now. They're not tough enough. They don't understand. They might be a little different, but it's always been that.
It's always the next generation sucks, right? And yes, things are changing in law enforcement. The job is maybe getting a little bit more difficult to do. Like, not that there's more stuff going on, but you got like your hands are tied a little bit more, right? And it's like every year there's something else coming out, like, oh, you can't do this now. Oh, you can't do this. Now you have to do this. Here's some more paperwork that you have to do, which takes you away from doing your job, right? So yeah, law enforcement, sure. Yeah, it's I guess, I don't know. I think if you have a passion for it, then and you enjoy going to work and doing it, then I wouldn't say it was hard, right? Like, it's not, I think you have to have a passion for it though. And just like anything, right? Just like we were talking about with firearms training, you have to have a passion for it, or you're not going to have fun doing it.
there's a certain level of resiliency you have to have there too, I think, with regard to the being faced with the tough thing you mentioned, like a little tougher to do your job. When I look at that, I go, is it really, are the laws changed that much? Or, what's preventing him from actually doing your job? That's not what you said. What you said, sometimes it's a little tougher. And I look at something like, okay, well, the shop owner just called you because they had $500 worth of stuff ripped off. That's $500. Like if their typical day is, maybe a $1,500 worth day of the sale of sales or whatever, and that's what they need to keep their shop open, their lights on, put food on their table, and 30% of that's sales just walked out the door. Yep. And you show up with things like Prop 47 that exist out there. Go, right. I really want to help you, but there's not a lot I can do beyond this. Let me show you tell you what I can do.
Yes.
That being the tough part of the job doesn't mean you can't do your job, but God,
something that used to be a felony is now.
Now I like in the past I would have been, give me a description. Let's get out there. You're putting this guy in jail.
And we still do that.
You still do that.
We still do that, but they get a ticket.
They get a ticket.
Because you can't book
so it's not
on that
doing
stuff
your
in that
job.
county.
It's not doing your job, but it does become, I think, a little bit more difficult in terms of the conversation that you have to have with the shop owner who doesn't understand how and why this has happened.
This is where
I get that.
Goes back to, I talked about on the firearms instructing is, hey, every time you show up and teach a class, you have to be on your A game. You have to be in a positive mindset, making sure people know that you want to be there. And it's the exact same thing for being an officer. It's like, hey, yeah, sure. You go to, hey, my car got broken into 100 times a week, right?
Right.
But this is the first time this person's car has ever been broken into. And their experience with that is going to be greatly different than yours. And you have to approach them as being a little more understanding of like, hey, man, they just got violated in this sort of way. And that's not a big deal to you, huge deal to them. And so don't discredit them. Don't blow them off or slough off this call. Like, hey, treat every call as this is your mom, right? How would you want this to be done if this was your mom? And that's where it goes back to, you got to be passionate about this. If you're not passionate about it, you go and you treat this person like shit because you're kind of just there for the check. You don't put a whole lot of investment into it. They have a bad experience with law enforcement now that they will later on in life maybe draw from. And it's just a snowball effect that didn't need to be there. And so
that was a choice that you made going into that too. That's not the job is this, the job is that. That is, I am doing this.
Right. And
I am approaching that in this way.
We're not setting the laws. We're not setting policies. We have to work around that. But at the end of the day, our job is still our job. A lot of times people don't want to put a certain case on because, the DA is not going to file this. They're not going to prosecute. They're only going to get a week in custody or whatever. It's like, that's not your job. Your job is to put them in jail. What happens there on after, you cannot worry about that.
Yeah,
Don't
you're
worry
not the
about
judge.
that.
You're not the judge. System.
Yep. And kind of going back to what you were talking about with like the somebody getting their car broken into, right? Oftentimes when people call the police, it's because that's like the worst thing that's ever happened to them, right? So when we get cops showing up and they're jaded because it's the 7th one that they've gone to that day and they're like, oh, great, another report, right? And I think oftentimes, guys and gals in law enforcement get jaded because they have to go take that report again, but now they don't get to go catch the bad guy and throw him in jail, right? Mm-hmm. There's like, okay, cool, I go catch the bad guy, write him a ticket, and then I got to write another report. So in that sense,
the reward system is different.
The reward is much less, and so the job is getting tougher in that sense, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
You can't throw as many people in jail. Where before, like when we started, it wasn't outside the norm to take 2 to 3 guys a night to jail, right? Mm-hmm. Like you'd stop like anybody, and I don't know if I want to say that, but you stop like any grown man riding a bike in our city at
BMX bikes
2 in the morning.
At 2 in the morning, they're probably not an upstanding citizen, right? So you stop any of those dudes and they got dope in their pocket, they go to jail, right? And that was easy, and it's not like that anymore. So people get frustrated.
It's you got to work a little harder to work through the problem,
right?
Yeah, still law enforcement,
mm-hmm. Still got to do your job. And like Wayne said, like what happens after we put a case on somebody is not up to us. So stop worrying about what the DA is doing or what cases they're going to file. It's like, just do your job and worry about yourself.
What's interesting here is like you got 2 guys that clearly, appreciate one another. You guys respect one another. You spend obviously a lot of time together training and, doing the things that you're doing. I wonder, because I think a lot of folks feel like they're on an island all by themselves out there. And that's kind of starts that negativity. And it also, it also, I think maybe when they get into a situation where they don't feel like they're being heard or like people understand them or where they're coming from, it starts to lead maybe to some of this jadedness, and they're not having regular conversations about problems. So when it comes up, like they want to get it all off their chest or whatever. But I mean, taking it back to like the training environment and kind of how you guys are able to operate as a team. I think there's probably a lot of guys out there, sorry, when I say guys, I just mean there's probably a lot of officers out there that have had the opportunity to work, with a teammate, right? And at some level, and some haven't. Maybe you could just talk about that dynamic a little bit, because I don't generally have guys. I don't think actually I've ever had a team, like a duo that works together, in the department, as well as like as instructors in their own business before. I wonder how that works for you guys.
So we've taken classes with like duo instructors before. And then obviously in law enforcement, because of some regulations, you have to have X amount of instructors per student, right?
Like a 1 to 8, 1 to 6, something
right.
like that.
So California is like post is 1 to 5, right? So you got X amount of shooters on the line. You have to have X amount of instructors. So oftentimes in law enforcement, you'll have 3, 4, 5 instructors.
I had no idea it was that tight a ratio.
And if there is, what is it called, dynamic movement or whatever they call it, I believe that it's a 1 to 1.
1 to 1, yeah.
So no wonder you got so many asshole instructors out there. People that shouldn't be out there.
Right.
Because a good instructor, a really good instructor can, anyways.
So we've gone to classes that are not post, right? There's like 1 instructor to 20 students. And it's completely doable, right? It's completely doable. But again, because in law enforcement, we have these regulations, we do have to partner teach a lot. Wayne and I, the way that we partner teach is we kind of have like some ground rules with each other, and we're comfortable with each other enough to where we just talk openly to each other. Like, hey, you did something, like, hey bro, like don't cut me off like that again. Like, okay, cool, my bad.
I understand. In the instruction process. How do we do this better together?
Yes. Right. We're very upfront with each other. Like, hey, like after this happened, we saw some looks or whatever, right? Like, how do we make this better? How do we not do that again? So for us, like some of our ground rules is just like, we won't step on each other's toes. Like if Wayne's teaching, he's in front of the class, I'm standing behind the class. If I have something, there's a couple cues that I'll do. I'll either put my hand up and then he knows that I have something, he'll give me a nod. So when he's done, and because right now the floor is his, right? When he's done, then he'll go, hey, Jesse, you got something? Yeah, I do. And then I'll step in front of the line and I'll say something, right? And we'll switch. So, or I'll just go stand up next to him and he knows if I'm standing next to him, I got something to say when he's done, right? But I'm not going to interject with my thoughts on it, right? And another thing that we really make sure of is we don't contradict each other, right? So if he says something, I'm not going to come up and contradict. We don't do everything the exact same way, right? And to have 2 instructors do the same thing the same way on every topic, as far as marksmanship goes, that there's just no way, right? So there's got to be like some little nuances that we do differently. We're 2 different people. So we'll never contradict each other. But if I say something and I go, hey, this is how I do this, we never say this is how you have to do this, right? This is how I do this. If Wayne wants to talk about his way, or I go, hey, Wayne does it differently. And then he'll come up and he'll talk about his way. This is how I do it. So that we're not contradicting each other and going like, hey, do it like this. And then the other person comes up and goes like, no, do it like this, right? That's a bad look. And again, we've been to classes where dudes are shouting from the back of the room, right? Shouting from the back of the room, hey, actually do it like this. And I go, bro, you want to come up here and teach this class, right? So not contradicting each other and not stepping on each other's toes are like the 2 big things for us. Of course, there's like other little rules that we have with each other, but those are the 2 biggest things. So I think
that's solid like advice. I've been to a lot of classes where it's been multi-instructors and they haven't all been very good, because you've got this back and forth, or somebody's trying to be the man all the time. Nobody's agreed, on anything. And it ends up being distracting, but it also ends up being very redundant. Like you start hearing the same things over and over again. Like, yeah, he just said that.
Yes.
And you're not contradicting him, but God, you're saying the same shit over and over again. You guys, you're wasting our time. Let's move on with this.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I get that. I think that's good advice because I think, well, it's good advice for a lot of reasons, but for instructors that are out there, but also for students and how to pick up on things when you're taking classes from people, or when they ask you for feedback, at the end, if this is things that are coming up, you should be providing this feedback. Otherwise, they're not getting better. They're in their little echo chamber. And that is one of the disadvantages to teaching only by yourself all the time and not having like an AI in. Or, I've talked to other instructors about this before too, just like inviting another instructor in from the local area to sit through your class, to audit your class, and not necessarily co-teach it with you, but just be there. And then in the end, get some feedback from them. I think that feedback mechanism is super helpful. It just goes back to that echo chamber. And like, I know I was just having this conversation actually with John Dufresne, who takes heat. That dude's on the road all year long. And if he's not training or if he's not teaching, he's training with somebody. That's one of his favorite things to do is just go in and listen or have other instructors come in. And I know it's, some of the guys within that circle, they do that. I think that's important as instructors to acknowledge that. And it's cool. Like have another dude come in, not the dude that necessarily agrees with everything that you say.
Right.
Is that really feedback?
Right.
No.
Or is that just head nodding? Yeah.
Yeah. And we've had our growing pains as well. Right. And stuff that we've had to work through and go like, hey, maybe let's start doing it like this. So that we're not doing that stuff anymore, and that's stuff that we have kind of started trying to implement at, our agency and like, hey, maybe we should do this like this, like, not, and because you see this in a lot of law enforcement training, right? Like you go to any academy class or whatever, and there's 7 instructors there and everyone wants to throw in their 2 cents, right? So it's like have the person that's teaching the class, have that primary instructor. If other people want to talk about something that the way that they do it, great. They can wait till you're done, right? So yeah, we've had our growing pains too, but I think we got it down pretty well now as far as like partner teaching goes, right? Because there are those little nuances. But you were talking about like evals. We give out evals at the end of every class, and we tell the students like, hey, put down your honest thoughts.
Not going to hurt our feelings.
You're not going to hurt our feelings. All you're going to do is better the class, right? It's going to be better the next time because we're going to read it. And there's a lot of that stuff that we take into consideration, and we go, hey, maybe we should, maybe try that. Some stuff that we don't, but a lot of it that we take into consideration. So.
Yeah, I think those things are important too. I mean, like, no one comment anybody's going to be making, whether it's positive or negative, is going to stop me from teaching this.
Correct.
Or this course. So it's not going to change the world, but it could be very helpful in making it better for somebody. So just put it out there. Those are things that are, I've seen the best instructors, and they sit there at the end and they really ask, and they sit there and they will nod and they will wait till the person's done. Because I think, a lot of times I've seen this done where it gets like the day has to end at 3 so that we can, pick up brass and get off the range. Because if we're not off the range by 3:30, then the RSOs out there or whatever, and they're giving you they're giving you a hard time or whatever. So they stop they stop at 2:55, and it's like, hey, that was a great class today. Thanks everybody for coming out, because they were trying to cram in all their stuff. And then, hey, let's hear feedback. There's 15 people in the group, and they're going to get feedback from it. Good feedback in 5 minutes. When everybody's tired, hungry, they know they got to be out of there at 3:30 at the end of the week.
And the feedback that you get in person is different than what they're going to write down on an anonymous piece of paper, right? Like they're going to tell you to your face in front of the whole class that you're awesome.
No, generally what you hear is the positive stuff, right?
Like, you're not going to shit all over you in front of everybody.
Well,
I will.
Typically.
We had a course where, we were doing this debrief, and we purposely said like, no, like everyone was being nice. We're like, no, stop. And from here on out, shit on us. Tell us the things you liked that you would want, or that you didn't like that you'd want to change. Oh, bro. It like got personal. Yeah, like, these dudes are like shitting on us. I'm like, okay, all right, maybe don't like go that hard in the paint, man.
Like for the
but
most,
it's being honest, right?
Yeah,
and for the most part, like the evals, people like what we get good feedback for the most part, right? We do have some stuff that people are going like, hey, we want this, we want that. Some of that stuff we can't give them. You know what I mean? Like, hey, we want a night portion of the class. Like, okay, well, this class is already post-approved, bro. Like, sorry, we can't just, maybe in a couple years. But, some of the stuff we can or can't do. If we can do it, then we really take it into consideration. But if it's like, hey, make it a 5-day class and it's a 2-day class, like, yeah, it's not going to happen,
Yeah, I mean, you're going to get that kind of feedback sometimes, but I think it's good for the student and good for the instructor to hear, kind of like how that's handled and how you handle it, because I've seen some handle it really well. I've seen some just olay the shit out of it. Like they don't do it at all. Like, again, there's if you don't have another like instructor there, some type of peer evaluation somehow.
Where do you get it?
Or feedback. Call it eval, call it feedback, call it assessment, call it whatever the hell you want. If you're not getting, and you're just going weekend to weekend, class to class, and you're just doing the same thing over and over again. Going back to you're on the clock at some point, and how much faster is that? What are those things called? The hourglass moving for you if you're not getting that kind of if you're not getting that kind of feedback.
Right. We're kind of in an interesting situation where a lot of the material that we do for our company, we do that at our police department as well. Like literally the same, because we believe in it. And we think this is the correct way to go about it. So naturally we bring it back to our police department as well. So not only do we have like Jesse and I talking about our program, but then we bring all of our information to our other 8 firearms instructors and say, hey, this is what we want to teach. We teach this to our entire department. We also get all of their feedback. So we don't hoard our information. We give it out there. And we encourage people to take a look at it, chew it up. What'd you like? What'd you don't like? What would you change? This didn't work for you. Well, how would you change it so it did work for you? And so I think having that resource as well is constantly just kind of refining what we have.
Yeah, again, you're not in the echo chamber, you know, and just in the again, getting only the stuff that you want to hear, or only getting negative for that matter from, again, an admin or just a group of, you know, officers on your department that just have a generally bad attitude or whatever else. You just mentioned something just in terms of like what people ask for, and is probably a good place to change directions. But you know what they ask for in terms of classes and stuff. I mentioned at the top of this interview that one of the things that I had seen come up, you know, coming out of you guys, like kind of right in the beginning when I discovered it was a lot of shotgun stuff. But not that I want to talk about a ton of shotgun stuff. I guess my question more is about like what's going on with Primal Response in terms of the classes that you're teaching. How's it evolved? What are you doing new sort of in the year 2024, moving 2025? Like, what are the market demands look like for you? What's going on for you guys? Like, what can we look forward to?
Yeah. Going forward, kind of, I talked about this earlier, is identifying certain trends that are just missing in this world. We saw with the red dot stuff, we put together a course, immensely successful, kind of took off like wildfire, seen a lot of good changes in departments doing that. So it's some of the other things of like, what else can we change? Carbine classes, for example, right? Not there's some good companies out there doing them, but they can't fulfill everything. Changing force on force type of stuff. How about a force on force? A lot of these classes, advanced firearms instructor, most people go and get their basic firearms instructor. That's the requirement. And they got that 25 years ago and there's nothing updated. And none of these courses are a requirement by post. We're just seen as going, hey, there is large sections missing within this industry that should be talked about, and should be addressed.
One of those things that we already kind of started implementing is we wrote a concealed carry instructor course, right? Because, and again, this is not something that any department instructor has to go to.
Right, but they're allowed to carry concealed.
Right. And yeah, post does not require the instructor to go to a concealed carry instructor course to then go teach their officers concealed carry stuff, right? The reason that we wrote this class was because there's, for the most part, very little to no training on concealed carry in law enforcement, right? And even that being like off duty, but not only off duty, but also on duty in plain clothes, right?
Really?
So like if you work a plain,
never thought of this.
If you're an investigator, like we both work in investigations, we wear plain clothes every single day and carry concealed. There's no instruction on that, right? So unless you're going outside,
this is mind blowing to me. Like it's just popped in my head. It's like you're right. I've never even heard of this or even seen it before.
You go to the academy, you wear your duty rig, right? You train on that duty rig through the whole academy.
You go qual with that.
You qual with it. You get out, you go to your respective agency, you go do the qual with your duty rig, and then you go out in the field, right? You take a little small gun, you shoot a mag down range, you stick it in your pants, and you're out in the world, right? That's it. So now, what are the differences between concealed carry and exposed carry? Not a ton. I will say the differences are two major differences is the draw, right? How are you getting this gun out and
getting it into the fight?
And how long is it taking you to get this gun out?
Into the fight, yes.
And into the fight. And then what are your capabilities with that gun? Because if you're carrying a Glock 17 every day, but then you stick a a LCP in your pocket? Like, really, what are you doing with that thing, right? What's the mindset behind carrying that size of gun, right? And mindset's not going to win the fight. It's got to be mindset coupled with your skill and ability to do it, right? But what is your mindset on carrying that size of gun, and what are you going to defend with that?
Have you even had that conversation in your own head, let alone with somebody else?
So because of that, we're like, hey, look, we got to try to change the mindset in law enforcement. Let's put out this class. So we wrote that class, post-approved, concealed carry instructor course. So that's another class that we're running a lot of. We just did a training at our agency for concealed carry, which was essentially our class, a 16-hour class broken down into 4 hours. A lot of the instructor stuff taken out of it, but just implementing
the basics, the fundamentals.
The fundamentals of getting that gun out into the fight, putting rounds down range. What are your capabilities with it? And what times are we looking at for how we're getting that thing out?
In terms of trying to standardize something from a qualification perspective.
Right, and just giving them a little bit of training.
Giving them some direction though too, like how fast should I be?
Right. And some ideas on how they're carrying. We had, people showing up carrying all different ways, small of the back, where the handle of the gun's on the opposite side of the body, so they can't even get to it. Right.
Oh,
so
you mean on the weak side versus stronger support?
Right. So they're like, hey, I'm just shoving it in my pants somewhere just to have a gun on me, or I'm carrying this little gun because, and there's this, the term that I've heard a lot that I don't know who coined this term, but it being like a gut gun, right? Where it's like, this is an up close and personal type of gun. It's like, you're not going to dictate that, bro. You know what I mean? So it's changing that mindset in law enforcement is really what we're trying to do with that class.
A gut gun.
Yeah.
I can make some guesses as to where that term came from.
Yeah.
He's north of us. I think, that's actually interesting. Like, I guess I never thought of it that way with regard to like, what are some of the missing pieces just in law enforcement, but you nailed it. Cause I think that really is where the bigger market is, man. And those people aren't being talked to in that way. When I say those people, I mean all people that have a very base level understanding. Maybe they had that initial training, whatever it is. It's a civilian that had to go through the CCW class. It's the cop that went through quals and that's all he got. Or maybe did do the red dot class, but we've left. There's so much more on the table. Like, what are the bigger pieces, the bigger rocks that could be moved to help things be better just in general? Yeah. While everybody else is out there, not everybody else, just a blanket statement, but while there's so many other people out there trying to be different and teach, this came up off air, but like CQB, like how many, everybody's trying to do that. Why I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but like, come on. Like,
there's so many different opinions with that too. It's like,
why are we doing this?
So
we're doing this because we see that there's money in it and we see that people want it and I can sell it to them. And I get it. It's business, but like until it's not anymore, because there's already a small enough population of people that actually train. Right. So what are you building? In the end, in terms of some type of curriculum or something that the people can advance through, when going back to what you're saying, you're teaching them CQB, but they still can't shoot worth a shit.
Right.
And there's no accountability, so like I'm teaching them all these whatever tactics, right? But we're not actually shooting at anything. And even if we are using systems, there's no accountability to it. So what are they fucking learning at the end of the day?
100%.
They're getting an experience. They may be learning some things. I'm not going to take away from everybody that's doing this. I've taken some really, and my take was they were really great CQB classes for some really great people. But even they identified what the missing pieces were in those particular courses at the up front and in the beginning. And don't expect to walk away from here, an expert in this. You're going to get a taste of what this looks like and understand what you should be aware of in terms of what you're going to work on next. Those kind of things. My point is basic stuff, carbine, pistol, right? Like concealed carry, things like that. I mean, that's just a smart business approach, and it's not necessarily sexy, right? Nope. And again, go back to like your social media and how you're kind of selling it. Like it's none of that. It's the basics, right?
My favorite courses that I go to are basic fundamental courses. It's funny. California Range Weekend, where I met you at.
Yep.
I signed up. It was called Entry Rifle. I didn't look at like the description of the course or what it was. I just saw Entry Rifle, like cool. A fundamental rifle course that I can go and work on my fundamentals. That'll be greater. I show up. It was actually a breacher course. It was entry into a building, how to breach a door with a rifle.
Right.
I just show up going, oh, this is not at all what I thought I was going into. But it just goes back to, I only cared about what courses look like a fundamental course. Right. Cool. That's what I would like to go to, because the fundamentals that the world's best shooters are doing are the same fundamentals that should be taught with the brand new shooter. It's just the level of execution, the accuracy standards, the speed standards. That's the variable. That's the only difference that should be taught between those two. The world's best shooter and the novice shooter should be being taught, hey, this is how you grip a pistol. This is how you pull the trigger. This is how you manage recoil and follow-up shots. This is what visual stuff you're looking for. It really is that simple. The only difference there is the level of execution that happens. And those are the things that are the most perishable as well.
Right.
We can teach CQB and you can remember, okay, when I'm the 3-man, if we're doing this, we go here, right? It doesn't take a whole lot of practice or training to understand and to know that. And you could kind of remember that. Now, doing high-level CQB, yeah, you need your team. You need those reps to get faster and more fluid with it. But the perishable skills within that aren't as prevalent as they are with marksmanship and shooting and speed and yes,
the fundamentals.
100%.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Like when I'm looking around now and in what's being taught or what I would prefer to sign up for, it really is that stuff. I'm not looking for anything fancy. I like a cool experience from time to time.
Yeah.
Like again, like I'd taken a couple CQB things. I was like, let me check this out. Like I've never done this before, but let me go to the people that are being more upfront about what it is they are and what it is they aren't teaching. That's the direction I went. I had a great time. I am not looking for, to continue to do CQB classes. Like it's just not my thing. But I understand there's people out there that do need and want those skills. And it's very much more specialized, and they're taking their teams to go do these now instead of the individuals and all that kind of stuff. I only use CQB partly because it's so controversial, but also because I think it speaks to what you were saying there about, but the fundamentals are really what it makes that thing work in the first place. So,
if you don't have that baseline, then going to these classes again, nothing for you, right? It's like I could go to every high speed course where we're like doing Hondo rolls and sliding over hoods of cars, but if I'm not hitting anything, am I doing any good?
Miss faster,
right?
Yeah,
miss harder.
And in that, in the social media world, there's a lot of big pages out there that I don't know. Are controversial, if you will. That headbutting back and forth with certain tribes. I look at those large pages that have 500,000 million followers and they're not big into the shooting and marksmanship. They want to only talk about CQB and honestly, I think those are important in this industry. I think we need people, and this is going to be a controversial take. I think we need Instagram pages that look sexy for this industry. I think it's a good thing, because if you don't know what you don't know, if you're a brand new guy coming in, you could look at this one page of a GM shooter who's talks about the very specific nuanced things of pistol shooting on a range, wearing New Balances and cargo shorts. And it's not that you're not into it. You're not invested into it.
It's not very exciting.
It's not exciting.
It's not sexy.
It's a little complicated what he's trying to tell you. And so you don't get your buy-in. Then you go to this page and this dude's wearing nods and cries and lights and lasers and all sorts of things and rock and roll music in the background. It's like, oh, cool. That is cool. Let me follow this page. Let me start kind of going into this world. And I'm no different. That's how I started. I was like, well, I got this cool. That's a cool looking page.
Same.
And then as you go through that, then it's kind of on you to really start to vet the information and go, all right, a level of maturity is needed where it's like, okay, he's teaching this, but let me go back to this page now that I'm kind of
I understand
hook, line, and sinker in this world. Now let me go back to this page where I can understand what's happening a little more. And then it's kind of on you to decide which route you want to go down. Do you want to continue going down the sexy Instagram world, or do you want to go down the road that's maybe a little more of a practical approach into you building your own skill set? So I'm not really against people building these massive pages built around some sexy background and music and whatever. I'm kind of for it because it's like, cool, get this huge group of people in, and then from there, they will find us.
You're actually right. That's a very cool perspective for you to have. And I don't know that I ever really looked at it that way. This is we can often get very annoyed and look
100%.
look at that as cancer.
Yes.
Like gun bunny this, whatever else.
Yeah,
I think that's a little bit of a different
Some of it
thing.
can be.
Yeah,
that's a different thing. But look, I mean, there's these huge pages out there that do wild things like shooting freaking, test dummies with tank shells and shit like that or whatever. Like that might be a little bit out there too. I don't really think that fits the category, but I think those of us that have been observing this stuff long enough are understanding what you mean about these pages that have a lot of followers and they're doing it's very highly produced media.
Yes.
They're wearing seemingly all the right stuff. They're carrying a lot of cool equipment. They've just nailed that marketing game.
Yes.
And what they're showing isn't altogether bad. It's just like, what is the intention?
Yes.
And that's what the newer comer doesn't really understand yet. They're just seeing as like, oh, this is cool. This is what's available to me out there. And I don't know that I ever looked at it like the way you just explained it there. Is like, we kind of need that to bring people in, and some people probably do a better job at it than others. But what you said as how it relates to you. And I think that's like, when you say we need that, I think a lot of people go, I don't need that. We don't need that. That's bad for the community, right? In quotation marks. Whatever that is. But as an instructor, you're not fearing that. You're looking at that as like, cool, if that brought somebody in to somehow be able to come back to me to get more of a thorough explanation of what it is that we're doing on this very specific thing in this way that helps them be educated to then make a better decision about their next training course, about the next purchase they make or whatever else. That is a different kind of mindset that I'm not sure a lot of people are ready for yet, man. That might be a mind-blowing statement to a lot of folks out there.
You know, and I'm really reliant on someone's understanding of, because then here's where it does get problematic is this big head over here says this thing, but we're saying something totally different. Now who do you believe and who do you listen? And it takes a level of understanding and a little bit of level of humility to go, hey, just because this guy is saying this and he's got a lot of followers, but what they're saying is, hey, this actually may make more sense. Maybe I just need to go to the range myself and test these two theories, figure it out. And sometimes not everyone's gonna buy what we're selling them because of this person saying. And so there is a level of responsibility that the big head, hey, vet your information, kind of know what you're talking about a little bit. Don't just start selling, fallacies. But you have to put a lot on the consumer to go, hey, this is really up to you to vet your information and to figure out which kind of direction you want to go here.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing that's happening actually right now in that industry of instruction and social media and gear, guns, all of that stuff. And it's actually there's a middle group of people sort of forming and becoming more vocal on the interwebs about and saying the message that you said. There also might be instructors and they also might be big heads, but they're kind of filling this middle gap to kind of educate the consumer of, hey, here's something to think about. Like this, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not telling you who's right and I'm not telling you who's wrong. But they are saying like, hey, here's how you might make your decision. You need to think about this. Here's the things to consider before you decide on whatever that is. The class you take, the gun you buy, the gear you buy, whatever else. At the same time, there are a few of them that are standing up going, yeah, but if you're going to say that, occasionally you have to call people out by name. And you got to say, this is bad and this is why. Or maybe not say it by name and just be a little bit more obvious about it and go, hey, there's a couple videos floating around right now. And here's my problem with those. And here's the reasons why. You make your own decision. But if this is true and this is true over here, then... 1 + 1 kind of equals 2. And lead them down the right path.
Yeah, and there's a mature way to go about that.
100%.
Right? There's a mature way to go about that to still be professional and still get the information out there. Yeah. And then there's bullying,
not being overly bitter and being a dick. And
I love the fact
bullying.
I love the fact now there is a lot more policing with this material, and people are kind of having to second guess. Hey, do I want to put this information out there? And here's the problem: is if you are concerned and going, I don't know if I want to put this information out there, then why do you have this information to begin with? If you aren't so sure that that's what you should be teaching, then why are you teaching it, right? For us, I have no problem putting our information out there. Hey, this is what we're teaching. This is why we're teaching it, because we have this belief in it. And, within these tribes, we obviously kind of align our teachings and philosophies, sure, more kind of aligned to this group of people. However, hey, maybe they disagree with something that we do. I don't know. But here, I have no problem at all talking about it and having that discussion. Yeah. Zero problem at all. And that's where it gets a little, the hair on the back of the neck is going, hey, why is this person not willing to back up these teachings to say these things, you know? If you believe it, talk about it, be about it. You know, and so that's just kind of my thought of like, again, trying to kind of vet the instructors and who's who and
It's
what
tough.
the teachings are. And when you don't know any better, that's where it gets hard. It's very tough on who to listen to. And
Yeah,
it
it's
takes
tough.
some time to kind of carve that road to go down.
That was the whole start of this podcast and this show. You know,
Yeah.
this version
Come
was
full
just my
circle.
going through that process on my own and recognizing that, but also, you know, being very unsure, being very overwhelmed, also being very irritated, and just like there's so much off-putting stuff that was happening. I was trying to make sense of it all.
Mhm.
I think it's the great part about what you guys, again, going all the way back, you guys were at the very start of that journey for me and kind of seeing things. And when you were popping up, there were, you know, whether it be on Instagram or just in conversation with other folks, other instructors or other students that I was in other classes with or whatever, people could really put their finger on what it was you were talking about. There wasn't ambiguity to any of it. There wasn't a lot of absolutes either. And I think like when you look at like anything you guys do post up when you have time to do that with all the other things you got going on or whatever, there's some humility in it. And it's like, hey, this is the way we do that. We may drop this in there, you know, to kind of we're humans,
Mhm.
right? Or whatever. But it was very easy for me to read. Like I didn't have to try to read between the lines on anything. So maybe I didn't articulate that very well, but I say all that to say is like, it was very clear to me the message that you were trying to get across. And as somebody entering in, it didn't take me long for basically to get because my gut was telling me, yeah, I like what these guys are putting out. Like this makes sense. It's not overly produced. It's not like there's not a bunch of, you know, frill on any of this.
Theatrics.
Yes, that's a really good way of looking at it. So like I may not still have been sure what I was seeing, but when I was able to back check that against somebody or something else, I was like, okay, good, my gut was right. Like,
Yeah.
and it's continued to be that. And so this just goes back to what you were saying about it being very tough for somebody to kind of carve through it and understand like, what am I looking at here? But with some consistency, and again, those people that aren't getting involved with there's a time and a place for debate. But if that's what we're doing all the time,
Right.
like, come on, man. Like, what are you doing the other parts of the time? Like,
Right. Yeah.
what are you actually selling me?
Right. Instead of just making enemies within the community or fighting with people and being at each other's throats, like we can talk about it and have civil conversations and figure out, you know, discuss, hey, this is your opinion. This is that person's opinion. Let's talk about it and let's figure out why, you know?
Yeah. It's, I mean, the space is it's fascinating for a lot of reasons, but you guys, you know, in that way and what can easily be discussed and what seemingly is terribly difficult for people to
Fighting
discuss.
words.
But I guess, you know, just in kind of wrapping this thing up, guys, I mean, you guys have spent a ton of time with me and I know you guys got to get on the road and get to the thing, but just curious, like, what can you tell us about Primal Response? Like what's happening? How do they find out more about you guys? Like what should they look out for? You know, coming down the pipe, what are you excited about? You know, what can you leave us with?
Well, we're always trying to figure out like what's next for us and like, you know, the classes that we're coming up with. So we're in the process of writing a couple more post classes now.
That's cool.
And we love doing open enrollment classes, but again, the time stuff, right? Like we're on a little bit of a time restraint. So just based off of everything else that's going on in our lives and our careers and everything. So we're so like inundated with our post stuff that we find that we're stuck teaching all these post classes, which I don't want to say stuck because we enjoy doing it, right?
It's the priority if it's what's putting food on the table, and
it's the priority because we're getting, like Wayne said earlier, we're spreading the word through all these other instructors throughout law enforcement, right? So
it's not gatekeeping; it's just fulfilling the mission,
right? And that's the goal. So you know, we got a couple other post classes that we're hoping to get approved here shortly, but our website is primal-response.com, so people can go sign up for classes there. Instagram. Again, we're not like big Instagram people. We're not always constantly posting stuff, but we try to get some information out there when we can. And so, yeah, you can follow us on Instagram.
So for those that are in like law enforcement right now, with regard to the classes and things like that you are teaching, the post stuff that you are teaching, where do they go to find out about those? Is it on the website?
You can go to the post website.
Okay.
It's on there. It's on our website. We also will add stuff on, LA Haida?
LA Haida. If you get their email blast, our training will show up on there. But also hit us up on Messenger, on Instagram. We'll reply to every message.
Okay.
So if anyone has any questions about anything classes wanting to host, we'll come to you. Just shoot us a message, email us, contact@primal-response.com.
Is it primarily California?
So it's primarily California. We have gone outside of California. We've taught in Utah, Nevada a couple times. So yeah, we will go outside of California as well, but primarily our classes are in California. We're either down in SoCal, or we're up here for the most part. We teach kind of Central California as well. So we're just kind of all over the place.
I feel like there's a huge need in Central California across the board, man. I mean, it's just, first off, we're very limited as civilians with regard to just range space.
Yeah.
To get out. It's getting tougher and tougher. I was having this conversation with a couple other people today. As there's some things coming down the pipe up in the San Mateo, that sheriff up there put the restrictions up on the range there. We have a county range here, which is very tough to jump through rings and hoops to get on.
Yeah.
There's a few other places, but it's tough. And I see it's like Central California, like from northern Central Valley, like so it goes Sacramento, all the way down to like Bakersfield. It seems wide open to me.
Yeah.
Like, and they could use all the incoming help / opportunities they could get. Like
what we found too is that our classes up here fill a lot faster. We're hosting more classes up here than we are in Southern California now. Just dudes are training more up here.
It's weird.
There is a strong culture here, and I think that's picked up quite a bit. And there are other there's a lot of instructors that are starting to come in more, and I think provide exposure to what there is to do. And I think the culture is changing. Like when you talk to some of the firearms instructors that are here at these departments, I'm very tight with one of the ones, the guy here that's at San Jose, and he is very much about trying to pull as many outside instructors in to encourage. And at different levels, everything from, distance carbine, to PRS, to red dots, to, all kinds of different stuff on top of the training that he's doing. But he's like, look, the more the merrier. Let's just get people here.
California is interesting because everyone thinks, California, anti-gun, liberalist. California has a huge gun community, a huge gun culture, a huge training.
Massive.
Way bigger than what people really want to give it credit for. I mean, there's just so much training to be had here. And it's pretty awesome to see. And it's awesome once we started this journey, we kind of sat back like, is anyone even going to sign up for our classes? And then we very, very rarely is one of our classes not sold out. Rarely. Like we wait list every class because there's just so much that's out here. So it's awesome. It's really incredible.
And the level of shooters here in California is... again, another one of those things that was just surprising, right? Especially when we started teaching civilian classes. When we first started, we were teaching almost solely civilian classes or open enrollment classes. So we had a mix, but just the level of shooters in California is like it's awesome to see.
I love hearing that. I mean, I've always been very prideful of being here in California. There's a lot of reasons I get frustrated with it, but that is one thing I learned very, very quickly. Is that the culture here is very strong and the level of shooter is very high at a lot of levels, but there's still a lot of pie to be had here to get people into it and get them up to that level. So for you guys, it's been really fun to sit here and talk to guys that teach law enforcement and civilians. Again, I know it's a little heavier weighted on the law enforcement side of things, and I think that's good. We need to equip the people that are out on the street that are there to protect and serve, if you will, with the skills
or to the community
that they need exactly to protect those people in the community, to preserve the rights that we had, to protecting the rights that we have to do the things that we do. So I commend you for that, but also just for taking the time out to come here and sit with me and kind of go through. That was a different kind of conversation because we were able to kind of hit it from several different angles. It was great having you guys here again, just kind of going back. It means a lot because of the influence that you had on me indirectly right from the get-go. And again, that us meeting just a few years ago and it kind of coming full circle here. My only regret is that I haven't been able to jump into one of your classes yet and kind of hang out with you guys and actually done some primers. But that said, like I'll make sure that happens.
Yeah,
I've got,
let us know, man.
I'm actually going to be down in your neck of the woods. My hope is like in the May-ish time frame.
Okay.
I got to go down there. I got some personal business to handle, and I'll be in like the Carlsbad,
right next door.
Yeah, like Oceanside area. So I won't be too far from where you guys are located. Maybe we can connect and get together.
For sure,
man. Let us know whenever you're ready. If we're up here or down there, whatever, man. Let us know when you want to jump in.
Yeah, man. If you guys are around here, please, you guys are always welcome back to the show. Like I think there's a lot of things that we could talk about. It was really great to learn more about you guys and again meet you in person, Jesse. I always appreciative of the time that people take to spend with me. And as always, if there's anything that I can do to support you guys and what you're trying to do, the mission, the business, you guys personally, professionally, never hesitate to ask. Be happy to do so.
Awesome.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks.
Man.
Appreciate
Honored.
you. Thank you.